Action Task Force operates. They do not tell you how to do and how to comply. They ask you questions, and there's back and forth. There's dialogue as they try to understand how you are effectively, because that's the mandate, implementing the new standard. As a result of those questions, it became clear to the Director of Prosecutions and to me that we simply were not up to the mark. And the one thing that I have made clear throughout this process, that is a view that I have as to where the Bahamas should find itself, is that we should not only do just enough, we should do more than enough. We should position this jurisdiction not as the way the world would wish to paint us and other jurisdictions, some sleazy, slack jurisdiction, but to position the Bahamas as a clean and well-regulated jurisdiction performing and offering financial services to the worldwide community at the highest standards. This is the only way that the Bahamas can survive in this business. I will tell you that, several years ago, the Cayman Islands faced the same dilemma. They could continue to be smeared as a low regulatory and slack regulatory jurisdiction with all kinds of frauds and crooks operating from within its jurisdiction. And they took the decision to clean up their act. And their financial jurisdiction has done nothing but grow and grow and grow as a result of that. This old posture that we've had in the Bahamas since the last time I was Attorney General, to only do enough and to stay one step behind our competitors so we could say we have some kind of competitive advantage, has worked against the full development of our financial sector. It's a long time to abandon this idea that we could try and swazi the world, do just enough to look as if we're compliant while staying one step behind our competitors. That is not acceptable anymore. This jurisdiction will only grow, expand, develop new lines of business, successfully create thousands more jobs, attract more and more interest of the global economic community in the Bahamas, if we strive and attain the highest standards of transparency, probity, and regulation in all of our activities. No more midnight cowboys. No. And so, Madam President, nobody dictated to the Director of Public Prosecutions and myself. I formed a view, I consulted with him. He said he had the same misgivings, that we had to do more. It is the Bahamas' bill. It is the Bahamas' decision. This was not forced on us by any FATF or European Union. This is our decision. This bill is needed because it is the best and sharpest way in which we can meet the expectation and our own expectation that as a responsible and lawful government, we will be able to meet our own commitments made at the highest political levels to the international community, that the Commonwealth of the Bahamas is fully committed at the highest levels to the fight against international criminal activity in all its forms. This is our bill. This is the Bahamas' bill. Nobody put this in front of us. We conceived and drafted this bill to enhance the ability of the Bahamas to fully meet its commitments and the ability of law enforcement to prevent crime from being committed against others from within our jurisdiction. This bill is our bill. It will give us the means, by these tangible means, to show the structural reform that the Bahamas, by this structural reform, is fully prepared to live up to its commitments to the global community. Madam President, the Bahamas has always had this commitment. I remember sitting on that side in this honorable place when my good friend, the immediate past Attorney General, Mrs. Allison Maynard Gibson, used to stand right here and always say, oh, the Bahamas is a clean, well-regulated, blue-chip international financial jurisdiction. And I used to always tell her, yeah, but you're slipping. You're slipping. Well, we did slip. We did slip. Yeah, 2 weeks after we came in, we crashed. 2 weeks after I assumed this job, we got the news from the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force that they had approved the negative report issued against us in 2015. They issued it, and they take 2 years because they give you that 2 years to address the deficiencies noted in the 2015 report. And those deficiencies were not addressed. That's why I kept saying, you're slipping, you're slipping. The deficiencies, as we were ignored when in opposition, the deficiencies noted and put in a full written report, 90-odd pages, in 2015, were not addressed. 2 years is too long, too. Not to address a known problem. But be that as it may, and I cast no aspersion. No, I simply point to the facts. No, I point to the facts. Okay, those are the facts. And I cast no aspersion because we all know how complex governance is. We all know that things come and blindside you. We know, for example, that the former government got totally blindsided with the whole Bahama crisis, and that may well have diverted needed time and attention. I understand that, okay? But despite being blindsided on our part by Hurricane Dorian, the COVID crisis, we have not lost focus. We've got the job done. We could walk and chew gum at the same time. We don't just talk the talk, clean, well-regulated blue chip. We don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk, and we get the job done. Madam President, the world has changed, and we must change with it. You know, in the 19th century, the situation is very clear. The highest judicial authorities in Britain smugly and confidently declared that Great Britain had no obligation to enforce the tax laws of any other country in the world. And that was the prevailing legal doctrine well into the 20th century, right up until the 2000s, when everything changed. Prior to the 2000, with the first FATF round of blacklistings, this was the confident expectation and comfort of everybody involved in finances all over the world, that no country had an obligation to enforce, quote unquote, the tax laws of another. That changed. Since then, you've had, by, yes, imperial diktat, if you will, by the great global powers of this world. Firstly, the United States, well, the OECD, with the tacit and explicit approval of the United States, who leads the OECD, quite frankly, initiated the beginning of the dialogue leading to the common reporting standard. And then the United States administration changed. They said, well, we ain't bothering with that. We are going to enact our own reporting standard. And they enacted FATCA. The FATCA. And the FATCA says that if any United States citizen owns any entity or conducts any business in your jurisdiction your financial institutions and financial corporate services providers must file in the FATCA portal in every country and report their presence so that the United States authorities are able to determine what tax to assess on them. So we've had FATCA, and then 3 or 4 years later, the CRS was perfected. We passed the Automatic Exchange of Financial Information for Tax Purposes Act. We incorporated the convention's methodologies as an annex to that act. This is done by the former government, you know. The former government. They enacted an entire methodology done by an international financial agents institution, namely the OECD and the European Union, was spearheaded by the European Union. And they put all that methodology as an annex in our act and basically dragged foreign law into Bahamian law. But it was necessary. It was necessary. And so the structure of financial services today is this. All financial institutions or financial and corporate services providers, etc., who have any entities, I use that term broadly because there are many vehicles that are used in financial services, whether they're foundations or exempted limited partnerships, segregated accounts companies, IBCs, etc., even Bahamian companies up to 40% of the shareholdings. With all of these things can have foreign persons there who are manipulating assets through these entities. Well, if those foreign persons are Americans, the institution, the designated non-financial business or profession, lawyers, the financial and corporate services providers, which can be lawyers or special firms that specialize in managing companies, and the financial institutions, being banks, are obliged to make the filing in the FATCA portal. And for the rest of the world, they are obliged to make the filing in the CRS portal, both maintained by the Ministry of Finance and policed by the Compliance Commission. So everybody here has an obligation to make a honest and truthful report during the annual reporting periods for all entities in the Bahamas now. So, if somebody makes a false report or doesn't make a report, then they would be liable, directly liable, under this bill. But this is not about enforcing foreign tax laws, although it is designed to hook onto that issue. Because let's think about it. Criminals who make money on doing criminal things, if they were to deposit it in the banks in their own countries, there would be questions asked. Just as if you put more than $10,000 in the bank, you have to fill in a form. 5,000 now? It dropped to 5,000 now. Oh, okay. Pardon me. I haven't been putting them kind of things in the bank in some years through all this government service, but when I was practicing, it was 10. It's now dropped to 5, it's fine. I wouldn't know because I don't have them kind of deposits to make. The point being, though, that when you put in above a certain amount, you have to fill in a form. And one of the things you have to declare is what is the source of this money to the bank? Where did it come from? How did you earn it? So, a criminal, let's say in a foreign country, if he could just put money in the bank without having to explain where he got it, he'd be happy to pay taxes on it. More than happy. He'd be happy to pay 30%, 20%, 40%, even 50%, probably even 60%. If after doing that, he could take illicit money raised by extortion, prostitution, human trafficking, drug smuggling. If once he pays that tax, it's all cleaned up. Nobody's asking any questions. We just take our tax money and you keep whatever, and we don't care where you got it from. He wouldn't need to move money around the world. See, it's not about avoiding taxes. Why criminals shift their money around. It's about avoiding scrutiny. It's about avoiding having to answer, how does an unemployed fella earn $100,000 a week or $1 million a week and he ain't got no job? Okay, so you're running the numbers or running the girls or doing whatever, and he's getting all this cash in. He's got to find a way to clean it up. So it's not about taxes, really. It's about people avoiding scrutiny by putting their money in other jurisdictions. And as a consequence of the need to continue to avoid scrutiny, arranging for their names not to be reported to the tax authorities in their own country. Because it's not about taxes, it's about avoiding scrutiny. And the fundamental question, where did you get that money from? How did you earn it? So it is in this connection that the Financial Action Task Force adopted the mandate to require measures that are effective to investigate and prosecute foreign tax crimes. And that is because it really isn't about collecting anybody's taxes. It is about being able to root out the criminals, hiding their money in other jurisdictions, and taking steps for that money not to be reported, as is mandated now universally for all financial vehicles in every country. They must all make required reports under the CRS or FATCA. So let me emphasize, in implementing this law, we will not be collecting taxes for foreign governments. All sums forfeited will be paid into the Confiscated Assets Fund and will be used for the benefits of the armed services and law enforcement agencies of the Bahamas, for the purchase of tools, equipment, weaponry, vehicles, body armor, and also used for the financial support. And this was another innovation that we added in, this government added in to the provisions governing the confiscated asset funds, that such funds could also be used for the financial support of the distressed relatives of law enforcement and military officers killed in the line of duty or physically maimed and disabled in the line of duty. There will not be any asset sharing with any affected governments under this law and under these provisions. So just to be clear and to wrap up, the specific provision is this, that any person who with intent to defraud the government of a foreign jurisdiction, directly or indirectly, now what that means is this, the person abroad can be charged. This idea that financial institutions are going to be charged, no, not necessarily. If they do knowingly collude, if they do knowingly fail to make a report that they know they ought to have made, they could be liable going forward. But also, the person in the foreign jurisdiction can be charged in absentia. If we have an extradition arrangement with the country, we can apply to have that person extradited to the Bahamas. So if they either directly themselves or indirectly through another willfully make, delivers, or causes false or fraudulent information to be made to a person employed in the service of the government of that foreign jurisdiction relating to the collection of money for the purposes of the general revenue of that government of foreign jurisdiction, willfully omits information required by the law of that foreign jurisdiction to be provided to a person employed in the service of the government of that foreign jurisdiction relating to the collection of monies for the purpose of the general revenue of that government, willfully obstructs, hinders, intimidates, or resists a person employed in the service of the government of that foreign jurisdiction in the collection of the money for the purposes of that general revenue. If they do any of these acts in the Bahamas, they commit an offense and are liable on summary conviction to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 6 months, or a fine not exceeding $100,000, or both fine and imprisonment, or on conviction on indictment, that's in the Supreme Court, to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years, or to a fine not exceeding $500,000, or to both such fine and imprisonment. Additionally, the court shall order to be forfeited to the Crown, in addition to any other penalty provided in this section, A, any property which has been used in the commission of or in connection with an offense under this section, or any property received and possessed by any person as a result or product of any offense under this section, whether or not any person has been convicted of such an offense. And that's because of the difficulty that you may have a person abroad who could be charged, but he can't be convicted because he can't be brought here because you don't have an extradition treaty. But you charge him, and even though you haven't convicted him, the court may nonetheless forfeit the funds. Now, in this section, an allegation made in proceedings for an offense under this section that monies in relation to general revenue were owed to the government of that foreign jurisdiction by the defendant and not paid, as required by the law of that foreign jurisdiction, shall be presumed to be true, unless evidence the contrary is provided by the defendant. What this does is this does not put a burden of proof. It doesn't put a legal burden of proof. In other words, we are adhering to the constitutional provision that any person charged with an offense is presumed innocent unless proven guilty. In other words, you cannot put a legal burden on a defendant, and we don't do so. What we put on the defendant is that which is known as an evidential or persuasive burden. It is a duty to produce the evidence. The example was given of driving without a license in your possession. If you get charged with driving without a license, you just go to the court and produce your license. You're only adducing evidence of a fact. I actually factually do have a license. The police didn't believe me. They wanted to charge me. They charged me. See it here? Here's my license. And this goes way back to the old licensing cases involving the hunting of pheasants on the Lord's Manor by persons who would have been caught illegally, and poor people, illegally killing wildlife and on grazing lands, etc., that were owned by the Lord. And they were told, well, you need a license for this. They say, I have a license. I say, okay, produce it. But they couldn't produce a license. So that is how it goes, is that it is a persuasive burden. It's a duty to persuade, if you can, by showing the evidence, show what the facts are. But it's not a legal burden to prove innocence. And so similarly, B puts the same duty on the defendant. And then it goes on, for the avoidance of doubt, the onus shall be on the defendant to prove that any monies or information required, etc., were lawfully paid to the government to which it was owed. The word onus is not a burden. It is only a repetition in another format of the same persuasive burden. The onus is an obligation, but it is not a legal burden. The onus means that just show the evidence, where you've made the appropriate declaration to your tax authorities and you're free and clear. Your money is free and clear, no problem. So, Madam President, with those remarks, I commend this bill to my colleagues and urge them to give it their fullest support in the best interest of truly enabling the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and our legal system and our financial institutions and designated non-financial businesses and professions and all financial and corporate services providers to properly and fully adhere to the highest standards that we have as a jurisdiction have committed to for the benefit of all Bahamians, generations yet unborn, and for the benefit, in fact, of all of these financial services providers. Because at the end of the day, once investors are confident that their names will not be besmirched by being associated with a clean, orderly, lawful jurisdiction like the Bahamas, more and more and more will come and business will grow. And so we look forward, so soon as we are able to exit these lists, and hopefully it won't be that much longer, hopefully we can then engage in the reimagination of financial services in and from the Bahamas, expanding businesses, expanding opportunities, and reinvigorating that industry which we Bahamians invented. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second? The chair recognizes Senator Dwight Sawyer, former minister.
Thank you very much, Madam President, for those kind words.
You need to make a statement to the Bahamas.
Thank you. Just me well when you said former minister. Thank you very much. Good morning, Madam President, fellow senators. Once again, I'm grateful for the opportunity to stand here in this honorable place today, by God's grace. And I must give God grace and thank Him a lot. Yesterday was Thanksgiving in the United States, and I guess the Bahamians always reform in the United States, and I guess we celebrate Thanksgiving also. But nevertheless, Madam President, right? We must give God thanks because life is so unexpected, unpredictable. You never know where you may be from now on. Okay, so I give God thanks for that. Okay, Madam President, allow me to, before I make some brief remarks in seconding this amendment to the Penal Code, let me just say I just want to bring a few condolences to several family members, families that I know of. First of all, Madam President, I'd like to bring sincere condolences on behalf of my family and many of us to the family of the former Assistant Superintendent of Police, Mr. Whitfield Joseph Major. I always knew him as Joe. I didn't know his name was Whitfield until recently, but I always call him Joe Major. He was a dear friend of mine, but a really strong supporter of our party. And he's the father of Miss Kim Major, who's the pharmacist at McCartney Pharmacy over there in Centerville. And so I say to her, my prayers and thoughts are with you and your mother during this unfortunate time. I also like to bring condolences to the family of Mr. Fred Neely. Mr. Fred Neely used to be a former road traffic inspector down at Port Charlotte, the tall, lanky man. And every time you go down there, he was always had a smile on his face and always was very accommodating. He's the father of two sons, the Reverend or Bishop Raymond Neely from the Methodist Church and also Reverend Chris Neely of the Methodist Church, staunch Methodist. And to those I say, and for that I may their soul rest in peace and rise in glory. Madam President, I'd like just to bring a very, very few brief remarks, or briefly, in seconding this amendment to the Penal Code 2020. I would not elaborate any further on what the Attorney General has said because he basically clarified a lot of points in it and went over it in thorough detail as to the purpose of this particular bill. But one thing he did say is that it further gives the Bahamas a fully commitment to all the what we are doing to strengthen and making sure that we are a major players in the financial service sector in the world. And for that, I'd like to thank him for that, okay? But one of the things I think he did mention, and this may be a minor point, is that, and I always knew that was the case, is that, that it's an offense if you bring in something like a car or some big item from the States, if the car costs $100,000 and you put down a declaration, it only costs about $10,000, that's a major offense. But I think he tries to cover a lot of those loopholes, okay? I think it does, and I think he did a wonderful job in explaining why this is the case. But the important thing is that we just want to make sure that we put the proper legislation in place to make sure that we do the proper things that we're supposed to do so that we get off this blacklist as quickly as possible. And so this is another area that will, fortunately, soon we should get off this blacklisting and so that our financial sector could see a further increase in what's going on in the world. So with those few words, Madam President, I'd like to second this amendment to the Penal Code 2020. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Sawyer. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill will be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the Penal Code as many. The chair recognizes Senator Darlow.
Thank you so much, Madam President. I also would like to join Senator Sawyer and say to the Bahamian people, happy Thanksgiving. It's an American holiday, but for some reason we have adopted it.
We American.
I know, but we had the will to or not to, but we decided to go with it, and I was fortunate to have an excellent meal. So today I would miss lunch so that I can maintain my physique.
We'll follow in your footsteps in that instance.
But I would like, while I'm on my feet, to thank the AG who has the portfolio responsibility, along with Minister Johnson, to ensure that our financial services sector not only grow but maintain its thrust as the second pillar of our economy. I was pleased to know as he began to unravel the nuts and bolts about the fact of tax evasion, and in the event that if someone is charged, that the proceeds that is in the country goes into the consolidated fund and not back to the country of jurisdiction. That is something of great value to us, and it also clearly demonstrates that we must be 2 steps ahead in order to ensure that we demonstrate to the world that we are not only a clean and blue chip jurisdiction, but we mean business. And if you bring your money this way and it's not clean and you charge, we're going to actually put it in our consolidated fund and use it for the benefit of the Bahamian people.
Amen.
I also would like to, while the AG was on his feet, I also like to remind him that it was the Progressive Liberal Party that saw the need to establish the Financial Services Ministry. And we did that because we realized at that particular point that we need to be ahead of our competitors in the jurisdiction and to demonstrate to the world that we are serious about our financial services sector. His former colleague, who sat where he is today, did her part and passed the baton on to him to do his part. And there will come a time when we would look back at his work and say he can do more. He should have done more. Because we all know that the goalposts are changing and we must be proactive to be 2 steps ahead. Sometimes we make the right decision, and sometimes we see things in a particular way. We go ahead and we do it, and that changes. And so there will come a time where his work will be brought under scrutiny. And if I happen to be around, I will give him credit where credit is due and ensure that the work that he is doing now is recognized in the financial services sector. But Madam President, I do rise to support the Penal Code Amendment Bill, which is necessary to meet the international requirement to protect our financial services sector and the need for improving the country's financial crime legislation. Very important, because like I said before, we must demonstrate to the world that we are a clean blue chip jurisdiction, and we are not only interested in moving rapidly to protect our industry, but we want to demonstrate that we want new products in our jurisdiction, and we want to ensure that the high-paying jobs that come from this industry is protected, and we do all in our power as legislators to support the Financial Services Board and to support the industry so that it can be fresh and grow. The amendment to the Penal Code bill apparently addresses tax evasion, and like I said, it's important for us to satisfy the regulatory bodies who are constantly looking at us as a rogue jurisdiction, even though we know that we are doing all that is necessary to demonstrate to the world that we are serious about the regulatory regimes, and we will do all in our power to keep the rotten apples out of our jurisdiction. Madam President, the Progressive Liberal Party as an organization has made a commitment to the financial services sector that we will do all in our power to support legislation and to listen to the concerns as it relates to what is necessary to keep the industry secure and protected. We fully support this bill, and we will continue to do our part as an organization to protect the industry, to ensure that jobs are secured, and by extension, help the sector attract new business to our jurisdiction. So again, I'd like to say that the bill is a timely bill. It definitely will help the government and help the sector as the government create the necessary legislative agenda and protocols to ensure that they move from the gray list and begin to bring us back from being blacklisted as a result. So with those few words, Madam President, I do support the amendment, and we look forward to supporting any well thought out bills that can help the financial services sector not only to grow, but to thrive and actually become even more of a greater force to assist us in our recovery from the devastations as a result of the pandemic that is in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Aspen. The chair recognizes Senator Kwesi Thompson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I intend to be very, very short. Madam President, I echo the words of colleagues with respect to Thanksgiving that took place yesterday, and also want to add my words of well wishes to name in public. You know, this morning a song came to mind, and I am not a singer. I wish I was, but I'm not a singer. I'm one of those who just is make a noise.
Just give thanks.
But you know, there's a song that came to mind that says, "Every day is a day of Thanksgiving." God's been so good to me that every day He's blessing me, and you know, it then goes on. Every day is a day of Thanksgiving, and so, Madam President, you know, those are some encouraging words that we want to leave with the public, and that we get sometimes so caught up in what we don't have, and we get so caught up in what we miss that we forget to give God thanks for what we do have. And the Bahamas still has a lot to give God thanks for. An incredible amount of things that we have to give God thanks for. And so in the midst of the struggle, in the midst of the pain, in the midst of the loss, in the midst of the tragedy, we still must take time to give God thanks for what we do have. But Madam President, I want to just quickly add my words of support to the Penal Code Amendment bill. As was said earlier, it is a very important piece of legislation that adds to the fight to get off the blacklist. And I want to commend the Attorney General and his staff and the folks at the Ministry of Finance and the other ministries who are fighting and working every day to make this a reality. This is, in some cases, their passion to ensure that the Bahamas is removed from the blacklist. And so I want to commend them for this continual work. And this is just another step in that direction. There was something that Senator Darwell said that sparked another thought that I completely agree with. And his point was that the funds that are confiscated after the conviction, or the funds that are confiscated in the midst of the action, that they will be kept by the Bahamas government. And I agree with him that that is a very significant point. It demonstrates sovereignty, and it demonstrates that you are not just being led by other countries to collect what they believe is their lost tax revenue. But it says and speaks volumes to other countries, but it also speaks volumes to those who wish to do business in the Bahamas. That should you do wrong, that we will hold you accountable, but we will hold you accountable in this country because you have committed wrong against this country as well. So I support what he said, that it is a significant issue. It also, Madam President, demonstrates that we wish to continue to raise the standards in the financial industry. And as the Attorney General indicated, that there was a previous regime in place that needed to be improved. And so this is a step in the right direction to improve those matters that were there before. So we continue to attempt to raise the standard when it comes to the financial industry. Because what we want to demonstrate to the world, and we know that there are thousands of persons who want to do legitimate business with the Bahamas. And the message that we want to send out is we only want to do business with legitimate persons in the world. And we are a serious player with respect to the financial service industry. And we want to be at the top when it comes to standards. And so, Madam President, this again, I believe, helps to raise those standards and to demonstrate that we want to operate with the highest standards, Madam President. So with those few words, I want to lend my voice of support to the Penal Code Amendment Bill. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. The chair recognizes Senator Mitchell.
Yeah, Madam President, I don't doubt that these matters are all done with good intentions, but I'm afraid I'm not convinced that
You're afraid?
I said, I'm afraid I'm not convinced of the goodwill of some of these places toward the Bahamas. And all I say is, here we go again. Making life more difficult for people to do business in this country. But we support the bill, as Senator Darville has indicated. And I just mentioned this, I always say that the people who are driving this, of course, is the French. And if you've been watching the network television these days, there's a scene of the French foreign minister in 1945 declaring France's support for the Declaration of Human Rights, while at the same time murdering Africans and Indo-Chinese in there trying to keep their empire going. And when the United Nations intervened in it, they said, "Butt out of our business." So there's a double standard that always operates with these countries, and unfortunately, because of the power and the trade in the market, there's nothing we can do about it. So we capitulate again. Down below, in the other place, your colleagues got very upset because the leader of the opposition raised this case of Yvette Bailey and Alpha Technologies, which is about re-invoicing. It has to do with a lady who's a whistleblower. Your former colleague was a shareholder and a director of Sky Bahamas, and this lady was dismissed. And it said during the course of the case that there was re-invoicing going on in the Bahamas. And the question we were seeking to clarify is, does this bill cover that fact of re-invoicing? Now, this is a very clever term. I don't think anybody really thought that there was anything criminal about re-invoicing. I think how that operates is there are some laws in the United States which cause less tax to be paid on a good or a service if part or all of that service is conducted outside the country. But if you look at it, since there's actually doesn't seem as if there's any actual physical value added to it, it looks as if you're just adding 15% by taking the money outside and sending it back into the United States. And that's what this case was about. The whistleblower said that she was dismissed because she was concerned about this re-invoicing that was going on through Sky Bahamas. And what we want to find out, that's the reason we asked the question, is does this re-invoicing cover this issue? So I will leave it there. We support the bill. A double standard, I think Bahamians are kind of sick and tired of this. Always changing the goalpost. Banking has become a nightmare, and on and on and on and on. But, you're railing at the wind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Tasmani?
That's all you have to say.
Madam President, let me commend all senators for the quality of their contributions on this matter. I also would like to thank the opposition. At the very beginning of this crisis, as we were moving ahead and had commenced, to bring forward transformative legislation, a whole new Proceeds of Crime Act, a whole new Financial Transactions Reporting Act, I thought to myself that we can't afford to have these necessary reforms become the subject of political acrimony. So I reached out to the leader of the opposition, and we have this beautiful photograph. I know that Minister Johnson, who's in the photograph, sometimes likes to pull it out to make a political point. I'm not making a political point. I'm saying thank you. I say thank you to the opposition for having accepted my invitation, for having come and committed to walking in lockstep with the government as we embarked on the radical transformations that we had to do. that commitment on their part to assist us in saving the financial sector never wavered. So I think it's very important to note that on some things, the national interest must and always will prevail when there is goodwill on all sides. And for our part, we have sought to continue to extend that hand of goodwill on these matters, and we look forward going forward. The future governments will always embrace the position that as these matters are challenges that often come from abroad, we must, as one united people, rise up to meet the challenges for the good of every Bahamian. So I thank you. I think the Paradise Papers, which was a great leak that occurred of documents, particularly from the Bahamas, indicated the re-invoicing was really a bread and butter part of the industry for many years. But I think is no longer the way in which these things operate in terms of the financial sector. I think that business is long gone. I remember a certain bishop, his name got caught up in it, and and there was all these sort of scorn poured out on the poor gentleman, and he used to work for a reputable financial institution that is still here, and re-invoicing was a big thing. But with the substance requirements bills that were passed, there's no longer, and it was basically considered up until the point where it was disclosed in the leak to be legitimate business, back office work as they called it. But with the substance requirements bills, that business it has largely evaporated because we're now requiring physical presence in the Bahamas by the controllers, the boards of directors, and everything else. So I'm not sure that is a live issue anymore in terms of our financial sector. But I know that it was a cause. If someone produces any false statement, that is what the bill criminalizes. Now, if it could be shown that a re-invoicing situation that might be a problem. But that business, I believe, has largely evaporated because of the scrutiny thrown by the Paradise Papers on it. What is important is that at no step in the provision of financial services should any person in the Bahamas make a statement that is not true. That is the important thing. So we'll see where that goes and how it goes. But the intent is not to criminalize our institutions, but to ensure that in everything they do, it is transparent and it is accurate. And it is not deceptive, because that is when you would get into serious problems. Because I can assure everyone within the sound of my voice of the intent of the Office of the Attorney General, Ministry of Financial Services, Trade and Investment and Immigration, and law enforcement agencies to ensure that the laws of the Bahamas are strictly complied with and that we continue to be a clean and well-regulated jurisdiction. That is paramount. We cannot survive in this world with some of the old practices. On that, Madam President, I commend the bill to colleagues, and I now move that the question now be.
Motion is that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the penal code. As many as are in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Order that the bill be read a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to amend the penal code.
further second readings and committal of bills?
Madam President, there are no further second readings. I now move that the Senate do now resolve itself into a committee of the whole with Senator the Honorable Jasmine Turner Darius in the chair. If I may obtain a second.
It has been moved and seconded that the Senate now move itself into committee of the whole with Senator Jasmine Darius in the chair. You have the documents?
I think you should have a copy of the she gave the documents. She gave documents. Do you have the documents that were laid in the House? Because a copy of the bill would have been in those documents, I think.
We have the bill. I try to find.
So I need a
she
copy.
can-
So you're using my copy. That's
No. Am I?
you have another copy.
No.
Oh, it's gonna this gotta be right. Hold on. Quiz, you have my copy. Give back there. Yeah. We just need to make sure, yeah, avoid confusion. Okay.
This is at home. I did it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to find for so that she can. Yeah.
I don't think you did. I think you put it in.
But he read the bill, you know. He read the second.
Yeah, I think a second time.
Mm-hmm.
And
I could have sworn I did. Mm-hmm. Yes, you are. Okay. It has been moved and seconded that the Senate moves itself into the committee of the whole. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The Senate now moves into the committee of the whole. With Senator Jack. Who said that?
Senator Jasmine Turner Darius in the chair.
Yeah, we did that.
No, we didn't.
Didn't we do that? Yeah. I'm trying to, I don't have it. Oh, God. I don't have a copy of that. You have something on the committee of the whole? 'Cause
Huh?
I don't have it. For the committee of the whole.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'll try.
Okay. Here we'll be through.
Madam Chair, I beg leave to move that the long title of a bill for an act to amend the penal code be agreed. If I may obtain a seconder.
I second.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the penal code, a bill for an act to amend the penal code, be agreed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it.
Good. Yes. Exciting. Madam Chair, I beg leave to move that the short title of the bill be agreed. This is the short title.
Everything was second.
Madam Chairman, I second.
It is agreed that the short, it is moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. The short title has been agreed.
Madam Chair, I beg leave to move that sections 2 and 3 of the bill be agreed.
May we obtain a second?
Yeah, Madam
If I may
Chair,
obtain a seconder.
I second.
It has been moved and seconded that
No.
that sections number 2 and 3, that clauses 2 and 3 of the bill be agreed. As many?
Aye.
Those opposed? Sections 2 and 3 have been agreed. The ayes have it. Clauses 2 and 3 have been agreed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You are a quick study. Madam Chair, I beg leave now to move that the bill in its entirety be agreed.
May we obtain a second?
Madam Chair, I second. I stand to second.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The bill in its entirety the ayes have it, and the bill in its entirety have been agreed.
Thank you so very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I now beg leave to move that Madam President do resume her seat. If I may obtain a second.
Madam Chair, I second.
It has been moved and seconded that the Senate President will now take the chair. As many as in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. The Senate President will take the chair.
Thank you. Now go. Now you report. Cause that accepted in its entirety with no amendments made.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Chair, thank you for the report. Entirety is agreed. With no amendments.
Madam President, I beg you to report the bill in its entirety has been agreed with no amendments.
Honorable Senators, Senator Jasmine Darius, Chairman of the Committee of the Whole, Chair Lady of the Committee of the Whole, has reported that the bill has been gone through in its entirety with no amendments being made. As oh, sorry.
Appropriation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Third reading and passing.
Thank you. Madam Chair, it gives me it's a great privilege for me to move for the third reading and passage of a bill for an act to amend the penal code, if I may obtain a second.
Madam President, I second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and pass. A bill for an act to amend the penal code. As many as are in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Order that the ayes have it. Order that the bill be read a third time and pass. Order that the bill do now passes and the title declared to be Penal Code Amendment Bill 2020. For the third readings.
Madam President, there are no further third readings.
Okay, so we shall revert to order of business. Consideration of House amendments, resolutions, discharge of.
Oh, yeah. Resolutions, yes. Right. Yes, Madam President, I beg leave to move the following resolution. Whereas pursuant to Article 29(1) of the Constitution, the Governor General may make a proclamation of emergency, declaring that a state of public emergency for the purposes of that article exists in the Bahamas. And whereas on the 17th day of March, a proclamation of emergency was made by the Governor General declaring that a state of public emergency existed in the Bahamas, and that proclamation expired on the 29th day of June 2020. And whereas on the 29th day of June 2020, a second proclamation of emergency was made by the Governor General declaring that a state of public emergency existed in the Bahamas, and this proclamation was due to expire on the 29th day of December 2020. And whereas pursuant to Article 29(4) of the Constitution, another proclamation of emergency was made before the expiration of a proclamation of emergency extended under Article 29(5). And whereas pursuant to Article 29(4) of the Constitution, the Governor General made a proclamation of emergency, hereinafter the proclamation dated the 24th day of November 2020, declaring that a state of public emergency exists in the Bahamas. And whereas pursuant to Article 29(4) of the Constitution, the proclamation ceases to be enforced at the expiration of a period of 14 days, beginning on the date on which it was made, or such longer period as may be approved under paragraph 5 of Article 29 of the Constitution. And whereas Article 29(5) of the Constitution provides for the continuation in force of a proclamation if at any time while the proclamation is enforced, a resolution is passed by each House of Parliament approving its continuance in force for a further period not exceeding 6 months, beginning on the date on which it would otherwise expire, the proclamation shall, if not sooner revoked, continue in force for that further period. And whereas pursuant to Section 3(1) of the Emergency Powers Act, Chapter 34, hereinafter referred to as the Act, the Governor General made the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Regulations 2020 on the 24th day of November 2020. And whereas Section 3(3) of the Act provides that emergency regulations may empower such authorities or persons as may be specified in the regulations to make orders and rules for any of the purposes for which regulations are authorized by the Act to be made, and may contain such incidental and supplementary provisions as appear to the Governor General to be necessary or expedient for the purposes of the regulations. And whereas the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Regulations 2020 empower the competent authority to make such orders, and whereas the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Risk Management Order 2020 was made by the competent authority on the 24th day of November 2020, and whereas the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Special Provisions Order 2020 was made by the competent authority on the 24th day of November 2020, and whereas, having regard to the continuing proliferation of confirmed cases in neighboring jurisdictions and active cases in the Bahamas, and whereas the state of public emergency in the Bahamas continues, and whereas it continues to be necessary and expedient for securing the public safety, the defense of the Bahamas, the maintenance of public order, the suppression of mutiny, rebellion, and riot, and for maintaining supplies and services essential to the life and well-being of the community to continue in force, the proclamation of emergency powers, risk management regulations, the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Risk Management Order, and the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Risk Management Special Provisions Order 2020. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this House approves of the proclamation of emergency made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 31st day of January 2021. Affirms the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Regulations made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 31st day of January 2021. Affirms the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Order 2020 made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 31st day of January 2021. And affirms the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Special Provisions Order 2020 made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 31st day of January 2021. Madam President, my short presentation can be summed up in this. 2020, masked up. 2021, moving from 2020, masks, to 21, a vaccine. That sums it up. We are in the final stages, we trust, of an awful period in our history. With the advent now of vaccines and the possibility of mass vaccination, we have the ability to develop true herd immunity and finally slay this vicious, malignant, and highly contagious monster called the coronavirus. We are in a transitional phase. The emergency powers orders are required. You know, it was sad for me to hear my good friend, the leader of the opposition in the other place, deliberately misquote me. And he's an intelligent man. And he knows that if you're going to quote someone, quote them accurately. He stood up in the other place and I watched him and said, oh, I said, the Attorney General said that we could do everything by statute. I never said that. I stated in this place, on this floor, from this same place here, that the existing statute, the Health Services Act, was woefully inadequate. That I said that we were looking at creating a statutory framework. But I also stated specifically that under a statutory framework, certain powers would not be applicable. Because the statutory framework would be a framework under the Constitution. And my words were very clear. Under the Constitution, and thereby governed by the Constitution. Whereas emergency powers are of the Constitution. And that is why they can extend to ordering or mandating things that would not be permissible under the Constitution. My words were very clear in this place. And I was deliberately misquoted. I found that unfortunate. I've known the leader of the opposition most of my adult life. We fought in the trenches in the criminal courts, side by side. I've always found him to be a gentleman. I was shocked that he would deliberately, in order to score what appears to be a political point, deliberately misquote me. So I wanted to be very clear. Yes, we are looking to create a new statutory basis to combat future pandemic emergencies, particularly medically associated pandemics that may arise in the future. The great difficulty is that this particular virus is dramatically different than all that we have encountered before. Ebola, you had to touch somebody, their bodily fluids in some way, their sweat maybe, in order to contract it. HIV, you had to do something. Unprotected sex with male or female. You know, it always amazed me as I was growing up, and I thought it was peculiar at the time. I read I remember reading the first New York Times article about this unexplained affliction affecting gay men, and they called it GRID, gay-related immune deficiency. And I thought, oh, so it only can stay there.
And it didn't.
And it didn't. So they had to rapidly change the name. So unprotected sex, though, it required some act. With measles and mumps, this thing airborne and whatever, and so whatever, but measles is largely eradicated. This particular pathogen has qualities that expand all of that. You get it by close contact. You get it by breathing, because it has airborne qualities. It's not considered to be fully airborne, but it is airborne qualities. Yes, you get it by contact with something someone else has touched. You know, there have been since. Why do you think the use of buffet-style service is universally banned around the world? Because people go and grab the utensils, take their food out, put the utensil down, someone else takes the utensil, puts their food in, and when they're eating, they picked up something from those utensils. So it goes by touch, like Ebola. It has all kinds of crazy properties, and then once it's in you, it is a monster in and of itself. It goes all over the place. If it goes to this organ and it gets resistance, it goes to the next one. And if that don't work, it attacks the bloodstream itself, the whole vascular system. I mean, there's so many things that are unknown even now about this disease. But what is known is that it is highly transmissible, highly. And therefore, only the most draconian measures can affect that. Measures that you cannot implement. And, you know, I was gratified several weeks after I made that statement in the Senate. A case came down from Trinidad and Tobago. And in that, it was a case where Trinidad had a 1940s law, well in advance of our Health Services Act, which is 1911. And they were using that in order to enforce all of their emergency orders. And the judge examined the orders that were made. He agreed that under a statute under the Constitution, you could impose physical distancing requirements. You could impose mask wearing. You could limit congregation sizes and activities associated with religious or ceremonial gatherings. But what you could not do, and he says it in paragraph 100 of his ruling, what you cannot do is you cannot impose curfews and the like. That is the phrase. You cannot, under a statute under the Constitution, impose curfews and the like. And the like would be travel restrictions, so that, for example, in heavily affected islands, at one point it was Bimini, then it shifted to Eleuthera, then shifted to Grand Bahama, then it shifted to Eleuthera. The government under a statute would not have the power to impose a travel ban, no in or out, except for emergencies. Yes. My distinguished colleagues from Grand Bahama need to leave right now to catch the only available flight to Grand Bahama. So I bid them farewell and bon voyage. Safe travels. I thank them for having been here today, and look forward until we meet again. Yeah. So the point is though, that the most effective tools in the arsenal of the government would not be available under a statute. Yes, you could do a local lockdown a neighborhood, but you cannot you wouldn't be able to lock down whole islands and restrict travel, and restrict the movements of persons of their own free will. So, because the law as it stands seems to indicate that there are limitations of actions pursuant to a statute under the Constitution.
Senator Darwin.
We need to retain in our quiver the power to quickly respond to any emerging situation that suddenly pops up. And what we know for a fact with this horrendous pathogen virus is something may occur, and 2 weeks later suddenly you have a massive spike somewhere and community spread, and people start basically, dropping like flies in terms of falling ill, overcrowding, etc. The health facilities. We have to be able to respond rapidly. And as I move to close, let me say that the whole world is in this second surge. We, having had our second surge, plainly, by the use of these methods, have contained and are now at the point of crushing. At this point, we're down from 120, 130, 150 cases a day. We don't break 20. We now 17, 19, 10, sometimes one, sometimes none. That is as a result of the judicious application of the emergency orders to address localized emergencies that have the potential to spread either from the capital to an island, or from an island to other islands and back to the capital, to address that spread. And we have been very successful. I want to thank the competent authority, first of all, for his wisdom in closely following the medical advice of the EOC, the COVID EOC. I would like to thank Dr. Darrell Regis, Dr. Pearl Macmillan, Dr. Delon Brennan, Dr. Nakia Forbes, and all of the other, Dr. Moxie, Dr. Bartlett, all of the leaders and the frontline workers in our the nurses, attendants, the doctors, all of whom at great personal risk, day in and day out, fight at the front lines to save the lives of those most gravely affected by this thing and put their own lives at risk. Similarly with police, law enforcement officers who suffer terribly. I thank them on behalf of the government and the people of the Bahamas. We are moving from this last year to all the bright prospects of a new and better future for everyone on this planet, but most importantly for us, for every Bahamian, with vaccines. But the transition is perilous. It remains perilous because we are still in the COVID-dominated world. And to get us from here to there, the same powers which don't have to be used. If we look at the orders now and the body of them, they all all of the orders are moving towards lesser and lesser restriction and greater freedom. It is only where there is community spread that draconian orders are made or kept in place. And as we go forward, as we see the numbers, and if we see clear evidence of eradication, it is then only a question of management. Our job of management becomes a little more difficult because we have to open this economy. And our major source of business, tourism, is directly dependent on one of the worst affected countries in the world allowing their citizens to come here. Again, the most precise and careful management of that process is fundamentally required if we are to successfully balance between economic necessity and health necessities. We have no choice, and we must maintain the power over this transitional period to keep the most effective tools and weaponry in our quiver of arrows of response, even as we seek to open and to ease restrictions. And every order that has come out has been a process of moving from constricted to less constricted, all the way down. This process will continue. It will continue. You see yesterday, the competent authority, undoubtedly with the support of the health persons, undoubtedly with the pressure from ordinary Bahamians as well, that they want to be able to exercise. And that group exercise is a part of that. And so that restriction has been lifted for up to 10 people as a group, because women don't want to walk 6 o'clock in the morning alone. They want to walk in a group. So if you say, yo, you could go and exercise from 6 in the morning, what woman going out there by herself 6 o'clock in the morning? But if she got her soul sisters together and they whatever, and so we're moving towards lesser and lesser restrictions. And so, Madam President, I commend the resolution to the favorable consideration of the Honorable House. We're moving in the right direction. Let us not adopt some silly, in my view, suggestions to drop our guard, throw away our shield, throw away the working tools with which we fight this thing, and leave everything to chance and to freedom. All this talk of slavery and freedom and shackles. There's no slavery, no shackles. It's about public health. And people are free to do what they want to do with their own lives, but not by their freedom to infect others who don't want to be infected. Nobody has that freedom. And so, Madam President, I commend the resolution to the senators, and I ask for a second. Thank you.
Madam President.
The chair recognizes Senator Dwight Sawyer.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President, fellow senators. I rise to second the extension of this emergency order. But before I get into the main thrust of my contribution, as a matter of fact, Madam President, I had quite a bit of written as part of my contribution today. But after reading the Tribune editorial this morning, I thought, allow me just to paraphrase one or two of the first paragraphs, because I thought it was really very fitting that everyone should read that if they haven't read it yet. But allow me just for the sake to read it, okay, if you don't mind, just the 2 or 3 paragraphs. And this is what the Tribune wrote this morning in its editorial. It says, the first paragraph says, there seems to be something of a conspiracy theory circulating over the government's use of emergency powers. Some, including some who really ought to know better, are speculating that the extension of emergency powers is part of some fiendish plan by the government to keep us locked down forever, to serve their purposes as dictators. To those we would say, take a look around the world. Right now, cases of COVID-19 are skyrocketing in Europe. The US is experiencing another surge with the prospect of potentially hundreds of thousands more deaths. And each of our potential tourism markets is still wrestling with the virus that has put such a stranglehold on our country. That's all I want to say for now. I want the rest to read wait further, because it sends the message home, and I think everyone who was not ready should read it, okay? There's nothing sinister about what the government is doing. Nothing at all. We're not trying to infringe on people's constitutional rights. All we are doing is trying to save. No, we are not. All we're doing is trying to help people save their lives. Okay? Save people, okay? All right? And as the Attorney General just explained a while ago that about the opposition wants to put in some sort of statutory laws. He says that cannot work. It cannot work. All right? Because as opposition, if we had done that, you always still be opposing us what we're doing, okay, at that time, okay? Because you all are opposing, okay? But you should only oppose when you have a reason to do so. There's no logical reason for us to do it. All right? No, it's not. I know. Anyhow. But the important thing is that we are doing this to save lives. All right? And so if something had to happen, if there another surge to come along, the government won't have to go back, run to the House Assembly, get the MPs there to enact, so that we could enact certain laws again, so they put restrictions on us again. We don't want to do that. And that's never been the case. So all this extension doing is allowing the government the ability. So whenever something like that occurs, they could have the power to do it. That's all it's doing. Nothing else. There's nothing sinister, nothing fiendish about it, nothing negative about it in that sense. Okay, and you know that. Okay. Oh, okay. So that's all I want to say on that part. Okay, I got one or two more points. Okay, before I sit down. Okay, and I just want to give a personal experience, and I just want to give a personal experience. The other day I went to. The other day I had to go to the funeral and pay my respects to a dear one of a dear friend of mine who had passed away. And the minute I walked into the funeral home, one of the family relatives come to approach me and want to hug me like that. Okay, and I just backed off a little bit. I backed a little bit, and then I realized why we said that you should keep your social distancing, and I realize now why. I realize now then why we said that at funerals and church services, it should be limited to 5 or 10 people, whatever the case may be, right? Because at an instance like this, you are overcome by your emotions, and sometimes it's hard to resist going up and hug somebody like that, even though I know the person. But I don't know where that person been in the last 10 days, the last 5 days. A friend of mine for the last 5 hours. And then you have reason to, you're not just going to hug up somebody like that. You're going to take your mask down and whatnot and probably kiss them. And this how sometimes these things are transmitted, Madam President. And I think all of you all would agree with me on that, okay? That's a personal, so when I told my wife, she said, look here, I now realize how this thing happens, okay? The second thing, I had occasion over the weekend to listen to a news taping of a lady out of South Dakota. If you all can remember, South Dakota was that state that about a few months ago where all these bikers went there for that weekend, and they wasn't observing nothing but social distancing. They listened to their, I was gonna say their demigod, no social distancing, no face masking, no washing of hands and stuff like that, okay? Because they listened there. And now, lady, she's home. She says her husband died not too long ago, and she's now pleading to the governor of that state to enforce some of these restrictions. But the governor of the state said no, she's not going to do anything but enforcing people to wear a face mask. But she's pleading to the governor of the state, please allow people to do the face mask, because it's been proven, the scientists have proven that this is one of the reasons, or one effective method for the transmission of this dangerous, insidious virus, okay? The third thing I want to mention also is that I listened to a news clipping this morning, a Washington news clipping this morning, of a lady commentator out of Europe. And she was just indicating why the measures that a lot of European countries have taken as opposed to those in the United States. And she gave a diagram of what was happening. Because in the United States, the infections are all the way up there, and those in Europe are all the way down here. And so she said, and there's only 2 or 3 reasons for this, why the Europeans are much better, and other countries also like the Bahamas also, is that she says, one, we listened to the scientists. We took what the scientists said. The second thing is that they implemented lockdowns and curfews. We selected restrictions. Not everything, okay, was locked down, and we didn't have to do 24-hour curfews. Okay, we did 10-hour curfews, 12-hour curfews, or 16-hour curfews, okay? And they sent out a clear message to everybody saying that you must wear your face mask, you must social distance, and you wash your hands, okay? And the other thing was that and this is very, very important, you must limit your gatherings to 5 to 10 people. That's very important. And this is one of the messages now being brought on to all the travelers in the United States during this Thanksgiving weekend. Please limit your social gatherings to 5 to 10 persons, because it reduces the risk. Okay, Madam President. So with those few words, Madam President, I'm not going to go to all what my speech is said, because I'll be here for another 20 minutes or so. But I think those few remarks should bring the point home. Please, listen to the scientists. Keep putting your face mask on, or wear it at all times. Do your social distancing and wash your hands. Madam President, with that, I enthusiastically second the resolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sawyer. Whereas it has been moved and seconded that the following resolution be put, whereas pursuant to Article 29(1) of the Constitution, the Governor General may make a proclamation of emergency declaring that a state of public emergency for the purposes of that article exists in the Bahamas. And whereas the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Regulations 2020 empower the competent authority to make such orders. And whereas the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Order 2020 was made by the competent authority on the 24th day of November 2020, and whereas the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Special Provisions Order 2020 was made by the competent authority on the 24th day of November 2020, and whereas having regard to the continuing proliferation of confirmed cases in neighboring jurisdictions and active cases in the Bahamas, and whereas the state of public emergency in the Bahamas continues, and whereas it continues to be necessary and expedient for securing the public safety, the defense of the Bahamas, the maintenance of public order, the suppression of mutiny, rebellion, and riot, and for maintaining supplies and services essential to the life and well-being of the community, to continue in force the proclamation, the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Regulations 2020, the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Order 2020, and the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Special Provisions Order 2020. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this House, this chambers approves the continuance of the proclamation of emergency made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 31st day of January 2021, affirms the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Regulations 2020 made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 31st day of January 2021, affirms the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Order 2020 made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 31st day of January 2021, and affirms the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Special Provisions Order 2020 made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 31st day of January. As many. The chair recognizes Senator Dava.
Thank you so much, Madam President. Madam President, this morning, I got a call from Grand Bahama from a very dear friend who was apparently admitted to the Rand Memorial Hospital yesterday, displaying severe symptoms, respiratory symptoms, fatigue, gastrointestinal symptoms, all falling in line with the possibility of the spread of COVID-19, and was subsequently taken to the accident emergency, admitted, and later diagnosed. The person is an elderly female who pretty much stayed to herself, which clearly indicates that on the island of Grand Bahama, we still have an issue as it relates to community spread. And as the member or the minister for Grand Bahama stood to his feet, like myself, I agree with the statement that he made, that God is good and his mercy endures forever. I wish my good friend well, and I'm certain that the competent physicians, the accident emergency, and the team on Grand Bahama, who's responsible for the management of COVID patients, would do their endeavor best to ensure that she gets the necessary treatment that is required and end with a positive result. Madam President, as a COVID survivor myself, I thank God for health and strength and for another opportunity to stand in this honorable place to make my contribution to this resolution to extend the emergency orders for another 60 days, this time until January 2021. I also noticed the fact that the leader on the side opposite started his presentation with 2020 with a mass representing both zeros, to 2021 where the zero represented the mass and the one represented the vaccine. I'm optimistic as a physician and thankful for the researchers around the world who have moved very swiftly to implement new technologies, genetic engineering, to be able to produce these state-of-the-art vaccines that will certainly prove to be beneficial in small countries like the Bahamas, reaching herd immunity and being able to get our number one industry up and going again. After the leader of the opposition laid the resolution to extend the emergency orders until the end of December 2020, we on this side were very perplexed. And I remember speaking to the leader on our side about, what is it? You lay a bill to extend for 1 month, and then a few days later, there's a proclamation by the Governor General for a 6-month extension of the COVID emergency orders. The proclamation, the resolution, the COVID-19 risk management orders, the regulations were laid in both houses of Parliament on November the 25th, 2020, giving the government the ability to extend the emergency orders until May of 2021. While the health representatives are on the air, clearly indicating that they are now seeing signs of flattening of the curve, which means now that we should be seeing changes and we should have more ability to move around and begin to get our damaged economy up and going again. Madam President, the country has been under emergency orders for a total of 255 days. By the end of the current period proposed by the government by January the 31st, 2021, we would have been under the emergency orders for 320 days. And if the order is extended to May 31st, 2021, we would be under the emergency orders for 440 days. And now we are an emergency state. This represents 1 year, 2.5 months during which our civil liberties have been curtailed. The Prime Minister, in his address to the House of Assembly on the 18th of March 2020, on the occasion of the first implementation of the emergency powers, said the following, and I quote, through these regulations, the Prime Minister may by order cause to be revoked or suspended all permits for all use of public spaces in any pandemic or particular area, or an island, or the country as a whole in the interest of public safety. The Prime Minister may by order prohibit the assembly of 2 or more persons in a public place in an area specified in the interest of public safety. The Prime Minister may by order impose isolation on all individuals within a particular area, island, entire country in the interest of public health safety. He goes on to say that the Prime Minister may by order prohibit a person from residing in or entering any area specified in the order if such person is suspected of acting or having acted or being about to act in a manner that is irregular. 2, public safety, the supply and distribution of necessity of life or the preservation of peace. Madam President, the last time we met in this honorable place, we on this side did not support the previous 30-day extension. And like many in our country, our position is unchanged. At that time, we made it very clear that we could not support the resolutions for the following reasons. One, since March of the first emergency orders were implemented, the government had ample time. And these are the concerns that we had. The government had ample time to bring legislation to this parliament to address the serious public health crisis brought on by COVID-19 pandemic, but failed to do so. Why is it that other countries are able to do it and we are not able to do it? These are the questions that we keep asking.
What other countries?
Instead, the government, for political reasons, seems to be content to invest all control for the management of this pandemic in the hands of the competent authority. And when we look through the region, the competent authority is usually composed of a group of individuals. In our case, it appears to be one person. Over the last 8 months, the competent authority continues to display what we see as dictatorial traits and refuses to be accessible and transparent to this parliament. We are concerned about this, and we will continue to bring this to the forefront. We view his action as an abuse of power.
On a point of order, Chair recognizes Senator Moss.
Thank you, Madam President. The Senator opposite said here just now that the competent authority operating as a dictatorship type style. I mean, you use the dictatorship. No. Madam President.
Madam President, I beg to disagree. I did not use the word dictatorship. I never did. Absolutely incorrect.
Madam
Please.
President, we dealt with this matter last 2 or 3 cities inside the Senate, where we made very clear that the competent authority, in this case, which is the Prime Minister, who is also the chairman of the cabinet, makes the decision by a collective body. Cabinet body.
So your point on standing Senate is one of clarification.
Yeah,
As
so yeah, clarification. I also want to bring to the attention of the senator that the fact that he's using this again. I want to remind him of what the deputy of the Progressive Liberal Party said in a statement that the issue of in his press release with respect to Zuma. He said that he wished the government would have consulted with him with respect to locking down Zuma. So, like Senator is the Madam President, is that the deputy leader of the PLP acknowledges that
Madam President, the senator could make this intervention when he does his presentation. This is not a point of order. I yielded to give him, and he's going on and on and on.
And
Do it when you get an opportunity
He
to
does
speak.
have
Let
a
me
point.
continue.
he does have.
Thank
a
you so
point.
much.
Mhm.
Madam President, we view his action as abuse of power bestowed upon him, and his cabinet appears quite happy to strip Bahamian citizens of their civil liberties for what we believe to be political advantage. That's how we see it. Despite requests from our side, the government refuses to lay its COVID-19 plan for the next 60 days. Where's the plan? We keep asking for the last 4 to 5 months, where is your plan? A plan of the initiation of draconian measures is not a real plan and does not represent what other countries around the world is doing. Madam President, the plan is necessary to be laid in both houses so that this administration can become transparent and we on this side can actually constructively criticize the plan, and we are quite aware of the crisis the country is in, and we are not stupid. We are fully aware of what's going on.
Are you?
We are fully aware of what's happening, and many of us are on top of what's happening and have made recommendations that we think could help in this particular crisis. Madam President, it is interesting to note that in his address on Wednesday, the 18th of March 2020 in the House of Assembly, the Prime Minister also stated, the Prime Minister also by order waive or vary the payment of fees for testing medical services rendered at our public hospitals or healthcare facilities in relation to COVID-19. Now, the reason why I want to speak a little bit about that is because in his presentation to the House of Assembly on Wednesday, the 18th of March, 2020, when he read the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Regulations 2020, he indicated that the Prime Minister also may be ordered to waive the possibility of fees for testing. We, in our 10-point plan, clearly indicated that we believe in free testing. And the Prime Minister in this presentation indicated that he had the power to do it as the competent authority. And we keep asking, why don't he do it? Because there are people throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas who do not have the financial means to do it. And so we beg once again, on behalf of those individuals in our community who are not able to have testing because they do not have the financial means, to give them the opportunity to see what's going on with their body as it relates to COVID-19.
May I interrupt, sir? Are you indicating that Bahamians who attend the public health clinics are paying for their testing?
No, ma'am. We're saying that when you enter the public health clinics, for those individuals who cannot afford, can have access to free testing in the clinic and hospital setting. But there are groups of individuals who do not go to the clinic and who want to be tested and should have that ability. That is our position.
To go to a private institution.
To go to any institution to be tested. Because these particular testings,
We have two systems, Senator. We have the public system and we have the private system.
I'm fully aware, Madam President.
And we are doing free testing in the public sector. And I'm not quite sure I understand whether you're saying that the private sector should also be the free testing,
Madam President,
at the expense of the government.
I am saying that any Bahamian who want to have access to COVID-19 testing should have access anywhere, simply because they need to have access. What is happening is,
but they do have access.
Let me finish, Madam President, if I may.
Okay.
We know that at the public facilities, there is that demand that sometimes you go to the system or go to that facility for testing and you find out that you're not able to get it done at that particular time. And so you must wait, and you must wait patiently until the opportunity arrives. We know the challenges at our public institutions.
Agree.
And because there are challenges at our public institution, if an individual feels very compelled that they want to be tested, and we know that there is a window as it relates to the possibility of shedding the virus, some individuals may not have the opportunity to be tested at that particular time and may have to go home and subject relatives to the possibility of exposure. So we know that, yes, you may be able to access free testing if you do not have the means at the public facility, but there comes a time where someone needs to be tested and we need to have access to that testing ASAP. And that is where the challenge is. Many people go to the public institutions, want to be tested, and the lines are so long that sometimes they're unable to get it done at the time that they want it to have done. Because of this pandemic, we believe that these facilities should allow Bahamians to be tested and be tested free of charge. That is our position. Madam President, as Prime Minister, and he goes on, as Prime Minister, as a medical doctor, I will do everything in my power to protect the Bahamian people. In my view, and this is my personal view, mouth could say anything, but in my view, the competent authority in this administration has failed to properly prepare our healthcare system with much needed funding, manpower resources, supportive hospital accommodation, and access to the latest international treatment modalities to reduce our high risk of COVID-19 mortality. The healthcare system is still challenged. And I'm not going to put that on the feet of the Free National Movement because it's been challenged for a long time. What we're saying, and we've been watching, that not enough is being done to fill the gaps and alleviate the burden on an already overworked and underpaid healthcare team who has been on overdrive for the last 6 to 8 months. Our healthcare workers are hurting. They are stressed. And we believe that the government could do more in order to find better ways to ensure that we alleviate some of these stress factors. Madam President, we have the opportunity to speak to healthcare workers in the capital, Grand Bahama, and our family islands, and despite the Ministry of Health reassurance, the following concerns keep popping up. This is not us. We find out what's going on. One, we're still hearing that despite what the Ministry of Health is saying, there's still shortages of supplies and individuals are not getting PPPs as they ought to. I don't know if it's a problem of the flow chain, but whatever the problem is, if the supplies are there, we need to get them in the hands of the people who are on the front line. We do not know what it is, but they keep saying this. And this is not from us. This is from the workers on the front line. There's also a problem of lack of COVID-19 testing. It's still too slow. And there is an issue whereby those individuals who have moderate to rest symptoms still are having difficulty to get the emergency care that they truly deserve. I'm not saying that the healthcare system is not trying to accommodate, but we need to go in overdrive if we're going to save lives and reduce our mortality rate. There's also issues with challenging and monitoring isolated cases. I know that we have the various apps, but we also have difficulty in monitoring these cases. And we're still hearing about the need for more government quarantine facilities. Madam President, there's confusion at the COVID-19 call centers. It seems as if sometimes you can get response that is appropriate and sometimes you can't. So we need to go back and look at these centers to make sure the individuals at the command centers know the information so that they can assist the general population. There's also issues with ineffective protocols. And we're hearing about a deficiency in contact tracing as it relates to our family islands. There are many people who have been exposed who are still waiting to hear from our contact tracers. And we know that one of the major pitfalls in the issuing or in the ability to monitor person-to-person transmission is that if someone has been exposed, you should move and should have actually contacted that string of individuals within the first 24 hours. Madam President, there's no wonder that the number of deaths from COVID-19 continues to rise, despite the great efforts from our healthcare workers who are working hard. What happens is they need the support mechanisms in order to diagnose and to be able to get these cases who are symptomatic to the hospital ASAP before we have these serious complications, particularly in individuals who have comorbidities. So once again, we on this side are asking, is the public interest served by the current government COVID-19 structure? Are the interests of Bahamian citizens who elect the government served by these emergency orders? And is the competent authority acting as judge and jury concerning the economic impact many of his decisions are having on lives and livelihoods? A lot of this is personal feeling and has nothing to do with medical scientific fact. Madam President, with the passing of the last emergency order, many Bahamians believe that the Ministry of Health had an evidence-based plan to reduce community spread of COVID-19, particularly on your province. We were told by representatives of the Ministry of Health that the COVID-19 task force and the Ministry of Health was adequately funded. We realize that this is not the case. And the manpower resources in place to effectively reduce the transmission of COVID-19 and the lockdowns would stop the spread of public health measures could be enforced by the relevant authorities. We're learning that they're having troubles in those areas, and there needs to be more focus on what is happening on the ground rather than what is happening in the legislative protocol. Madam President, following international trends and recommendations, we on this side understand well what are the short-term benefits of lockdown and curfews. I'm a physician, Madam President, and I have a very strong scientific interest. So I read extensively on what is happening and what should be put in place. We understand that when you have cases in your country that is exceeding a particular amount, the London School of Tropical Medicine and the Harvard Review have clearly indicated and published guidelines that need to take place. And one of the guidelines is lockdowns and curfews. These are unsustainable. And if the competent authority believes that he can continuously use these unsustainable techniques, it's unsustainable techniques. Listen and learn. We know it works. I already said it worked. But it's unsustainable, Senator Sawyer, because it will destroy your economy to the point where all of us will actually be on the food line looking for coupons. But the competent authority must now move away. Listen carefully, Senator, from these harsh measures that are destroying small businesses, the economy, and creating unnecessary employment, and look carefully. Let's stop looking at the dark side. Let's look at those countries who are making progress. Look carefully at the success stories coming out of New Zealand, South Korea, Taiwan, and other countries who have long moved away from the lockdowns and are now way ahead of many countries like ourselves. Hey, Madam President, the real victory will come by formulating legislation to improve public health protocols that we can all buy into and not unsustainable draconian measures that the competent authority is obviously addicted to. Sociology and human behavior have demonstrated time immemorial that the more you tighten civil liberties, the more people resist. But nothing is being done about public health legislation, and the competent authority only speaks about tightening and loosening the grips of our civil liberties. I believe that we need to think way beyond that, and we should not be caught into that web. I say that the competent authority in this cabinet, by the continued extension of these emergency powers, have taken the easy way out by flaunting their power while failing to do the hard work to adequately manage the process of healthcare delivery in our country, and failing to work through the process needed for us to ensure that we keep local small businesses afloat. The lack of uniformity in the approvals to open businesses as a result of these emergency orders, at the end of the day, will have done significant damage to small business owners throughout the country, but particularly in New Providence, the epicenter of business where the population is. Madam President, we on this side have been monitoring the progress of COVID-19 cases on New Providence and the Family Islands. We note that the number of cases in New Providence has declined, but so have the number of tests in New Providence declined. You see, the cases have declined and the testing has declined. If we do more testing, I am confident that we'll find more cases. We caution the government that the virus is an invisible enemy. And the only way we're going to find out where these asymptomatic carriers are is through testing. And the testing should be free. Madam President, the statistical model presented by the Ministry of Health proved that Grand Bahama once again is moving away from clusters of COVID-19 cases and is currently showing community spread. So it's there. The Honorable AG said that he's crushing it, but I want to let him know that the enemy is there. And the only way we're going to know is if we go try to find him. So by reducing testing, we have actually been counterproductive and relying on the short-term benefits of the draconian measures because they're not long.
But it waits.
You stop it.
It waits.
And after you stop it, it's right there.
But it waits.
Post-Hurricane Dorian on Grand Bahama saw unemployment, which we believe is somewhere in excess of 50%, and the migration of residents to the capital and other Family Islands. Many homes were destroyed, and hurricane victims are currently living with relatives in overcrowded dwellings. A time bomb, a social time bomb for COVID-19 community spread, particularly in these tight living quarters and communities that are densely populated. The question needs to ask, what is the government's social reform agenda? Everyone's talking about emergency orders, but we're not paying enough attention to social reform agendas. What are we doing for our low-income families and the unemployed? A lot has been said by the government concerning testing, contact tracing, government-sponsored quarantine facilities. But other than the short-term benefits from lockdowns and curfews to reduce positive COVID-19 deaths, little is happening on the ground. Many of us go from place to place. We can't do it as much as we like now. But we see in the low-income areas, individuals sitting down, unemployed, nothing to do, hoping to rely on social service assistance. And as that began to happen, people lose their accommodation, can't pay their rent, and most of them have to go back to home base. Crowded and more crowded, creating difficulties for individuals to be able to prevent the possibility of spread. We need to hear more about these specific plans to address these unacceptable social conditions, which are all incubators for the spread of all forms of infectious disease. We also know that the person transmission of COVID-19 in Eleuthera and Exuma is of great concern. We are seeing some changes. They are of great concern. We thank God that the majority of positive cases that are experienced in our country, and it probably has a lot to do with our environment and our climate, the symptoms are usually mild, and they are able to be isolated at home because we all know that the medical facilities in Eleuthera and to some extent on the island of Exuma is not able, because the manpower resources are not in place, to properly respond to the escalating cases of COVID-19. Madam President, there are few, if any, persons in our country who do not know of someone who has contacted or contracted the deadly virus. And we have heard of persons who did not survive the medical complications. I thank God that I was one of those who was able to survive. And I'm always on my knees because many have not been able to do so, particularly those individuals who have comorbidities. And that is a serious matter. We on this side grieve with the families who have lost loved ones. And we believe that we should do more rather than just the short-term solutions, the draconian measures, which we believe are unsustainable and doing great harm to our economy. Madam President, the information and the statistical data do not prove to be untrue. What we have been saying all along, that these sweeping powers given to the competent authority by way of these resolutions have not been successful. And the COVID-19 deaths in the Bahamas is now at 163 cases, the highest in the region. The highest, which means that as we did our lockdowns, we did not prepare our healthcare facilities, and that's what lockdown does. It gives you the time to prepare your healthcare facilities to prevent this kind of tragedy. It's not happened in any of our jurisdiction or the region. Therefore, we beg the question, are the orders effective?
Yes.
And other than the draconian measures put in place by the government, there's little success otherwise. The epidemiological evidence confirmed that the death rate of COVID-19 per capita in the Bahamas remained the highest in the region. And after 8 months of lockdown and curfews, the restriction of movement, the record would reflect that despite the government's effort, the country's response to this pandemic remains at the bottom of the list as compared to counterparts in the region. That's a fact. It is our view that the government's failure to adequately prepare our healthcare services that is directly responsible to this abysmal performance. Madam President, the government's stewardship in finding the right balance between commerce, lockdown, curfews, and the welfare of our citizens is way below expectation and is putting a deep hole, not a hole, is boring a deeper hole into our economic recovery. Madam President, these are the facts, and the competent authority must do away with many of its failed policies and protocols. That's the reason why we keep asking for your plan. We don't have enough time for trial and error. We need to have a plan, and yes, the plan can be modified because the situation is fluid, but if you don't have no plan, you just roll with the tide. And while you're rolling with the tide, you're boring a deeper hole in the economy, and you're putting Bahamians at risk for the potential of the virus and the sad effects that follow. Madam President, it's wrong in our view. And he needs to shift course. I said it the last time. He needs to shift course. He must be able to think and be able to listen. That's the main word, to listen, so that he can prevent many of the small businesses that are closing at a rapid rate in our community. And the small businesses is the engine of the economy. If the engine of the economy is gone, because most of these small businesses hire 5, maybe sometimes 6, or even up to about 30 people. If you begin to lose them, then you begin to dig deeper and deeper into the financial abyss. It's time to have an honest discussion with the Bahamian people, because we are collectively in this fight for our lives. We acknowledge and we understand the seriousness of this virus, and we don't intend to play games from this side. We intend to actually give strong recommendations that we believe can help the government and help us through this very difficult time with this pandemic. The government and representatives from the Ministry of Health have spoken about the purchase of the COVID-19 vaccines. And in fact, the minister is on record as quoting that $250,000 have already been given as a down payment for some 80,000 doses of the vaccine through PAHO and WHO. Yes. And looking at the chart that the AG has presented in 2021, there is that possibility. We in the Progressive Liberal Party have reviewed the medical literature and peer reviews of the current vaccines and like every country around the world, remain optimistic with the final trials would be, and that Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca will all get great reviews and get emergency FDA and EU approvals before the end of December. This is good news. This is good news. And we on this side support the need to actually capitalize on these approved vaccines, because we know there's vaccines coming from other places. I know of one that's in Russia. There's also the possibility of the vaccines that are in the final trials in China. But it's important for us that when we source the vaccines through WHO and PAHO, we get these approved vaccines to ensure that we have these 90 to 95% efficiency. But this does not mean that the government has a free pass. We have a lot of work to do. And once again, we ask the competent authority to lay your plan on the table to tell us how you intend to reduce community threats spread by other means and draconian measures. All you want to do is bang. You got to be a little bit more diverse than that. Every other countries are thinking, they understand the damage it does to the economy. And so they think beyond that. We are just doing what we need to do. Madam President, the Minister of Tourism has already launched his program eliminating the 14-day quarantine for visitors and returning residents. Much has been said about this plan, and with the opening of our borders, the possibility for the importation of new cases exists. The Medical Council of the Bahamas is on record advocating for testing of all visitors and residents on arrival from abroad. But the Ministry of Tourism opted to go against the Medical Council recommendations and have decided to eliminate testing on arrival. We on this side trust that the Ministry of Tourism plan is well thought out and all the checks and balances are in place on the ground to perform the necessary quick antigen tests within 5 days after arrival and approve the adequate response if an individual is tested positive. With the number of positive cases in our country exceeding 7,480, with some 1,693 cases, we listen to the Minister of Education. In the other place, speak about face-to-face learning, but I must point him to the research found in the medical journal JAMA Pediatrics, which clearly outlined that children and adults who contact COVID-19 usually carry a larger viral load. And because they are usually asymptomatic, teachers and family members could be placed at additional risk, particularly those with comorbidities. Understanding these potential risks, rigid safety protocols. We're not talking about letting our children just show up to school. We got to put the rigid protocols in place. That's why we keep asking about the plan. What is the medical plan to bring our kids back to school? Where is it? Madam President, transparency on behalf of the government must be the order of the day in the fight against this deadly virus if we intend to win. This was not demonstrated in the last 30 days because many healthcare workers still do not have access to what they need to have access to. And they remain in the dark and distant from major policy decisions that affect them directly. Other than periodic press conferences from the Ministry of Health and the Prime Minister, no one really knows what's happening in our clinics or ports of entry and why certain sector of our economy is open without epidemiological evidence to support the competent authorities' decision to do so. As a healthcare professional and someone who runs a business, I certainly understand the pressure the government is under, and it is important for them to think outside of the box rather than just sticking with this same trajectory. You got to change the trajectory, and this 6 months proclamation and this 2-month resolution we cannot support. The PLP will continue to reach to the government, and we stand by our 10-point action plan that revolves around free testing and contact tracing, and we encourage every Bahamian to visit the covidactionplan.org. to review and to give comments that we believe fits the country well and our archipelagic nature. Once again, we are saying that the government, to the government on this side, on that side, that while we wait for our involvement or participation from a bipartisan standpoint, we will not be idle. We will not be idle. We showed up to the meeting and we were run out of the meeting. Yeah. Minister was there. Minister was there when we were at the meeting.
You will
And
not
right
run out of
after
any
we
meeting.
made two statements,
You
the
will
Prime
not-
Minister
you will
told
not
us to
run out
leave
of- you
because
will
they
not
have
run
things
out
to
of any
discuss.
meeting. You will not run out of any meeting.
I was run out of the meeting, man.
You may have
wanted
felt
to
run out. That's because you
participate.
wanted to run
We
out.
were there for a photo op.
No,
That's
no,
all
no.
we was there for.
I have seen
A
meetings
photo
where
op.
you've been invited, your side has
I
been
was
invited,
there.
and you refused to come.
I was there
And
when
the one
you
time
asked
you
the
came,
question.
you gone out there quick. You
I
left
was
quick.
there
And
when
the
you
PM
asked
did
the
not send you
question.
out. You're
When
gone
the
out of your own
Prime
volition.
Minister said to us, that is it. We now huddle so the government can make the decision. So we were not privy.
No,
Preview.
no.
We didn't want to. No, you said it's bipartisan. Oh, come on, man. Madam President, there's no question that all
Anyway,
healthcare
I'll leave
workers.
you alone.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You have the ability to wrap up. I'm sure
I'll
you will
leave you
state
alone.
your case. Allow me to finish because I was at the meeting and you were at the meeting. And I was privy
And
to
we
you
all had the
asking a
president.
particular question. I'll leave that like that.
We all had the president.
Madam President, there's no question that all healthcare workers throughout our countries and frontline workers are doing an excellent job, and we commend them. We commend them for what they're doing. What the PLP task force will continue to recommend sound evidence-based protocols that are working in other countries, which could be modified in the Bahamian model. Once again, like my colleagues in the other place, I cannot support the resolution in its current form and without a clear COVID-19 articulation plan by the competent authority. We believe that the results for the next 60 days will be similar to what we have experienced in the last 8 months. Where is your short, medium, and long-term plan to upgrade the COVID-19 centers? And what is your long-term plan to establish an adequate infectious disease unit at the Princess Margaret Hospital to maximize manpower resources and reduce the risk of spread of infectious disease within our general hospital populations? Another 60 days with no legislation, with no articulated plan, we're about to get the same old, same old. This is sad because after almost a year, the government refuses to offer anything other than the taking away of our civil liberties. Like my colleagues in the other place, in good conscience, I cannot support the 60-day extension of the emergency orders. And we once again ask the government to produce its plan for the next 60 days. Thank you, Madam President.
Madam President, I didn't want to interrupt the senator, but
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
no problem. He said in this honorable house that the emergency orders is not reaping no success. I want to.
I never
shoot-
said that, Madam President.
Oh my God, Madam President.
Madam President, I never
Madam
said
President,
that.
Madam President.
When you quote me effectively. I never said that. I said that the emergency orders and the lockdowns are producing short-term results.
Like I said, Madam President, Senator Dabo said that the emergency orders is not reaping success. I want to shoot down that claim. I want to remind the senator that because of the emergency orders, recent statistics have shown that we are dealing with, we have 9 cases as of yesterday. Also, we have 10 at the Princess Margaret Hospital, 19 countrywide, and 7 in Grand Bahama. So in other words, we are trending downwards when it comes to confirmed cases. Also, Madam President, to show that the emergency orders is reaping success, when it comes to recovery, we are at 78%. Unheard of, which shows that the medical people are doing the job and we are on the right track. Also, Madam President, I want to remind the good senator is that we have done over 42,000 tests nationwide with respect to this COVID-19. So I just want to say to the opposition again, and in the words of Senator Darwell, speak the truth and let's stop playing games with the Dane people.
Madam President, I must respond to that. The senator who just spoke has indicated that I am not speaking the truth. He called me someone who is not honorable. I asked him to withdraw that statement because everything that I've said is within the literature and the findings that are in the public domain. Now, we all have the ability to see things through different lenses, and we all have our opinions. But for him to call me a liar in my presentation is unacceptable, and I ask him to withdraw that and withdraw it immediately.
Madam President.
I spoke the truth.
Madam President,
Yes.
by your wisdom, I will withdraw.
Thank you very much.
But I want to say this again. Everything that I said, I spoke the facts. And I just want to shoot down his claims.
Oh, Madam President, he could shoot down my claims. Everything that I've spoken is facts. Is facts. He has his opinion. I have mine. I have my factual opinion. No. Oh, no. Listen here. Listen to me. I read everything. I read everything, man. Don't believe only you and read. I read what's going on.
Okay. So, Dr. Darwell, you are satisfied. Dr. Darwell, are you satisfied?
I'm satisfied.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. You're a very honorable person.
As many,
Good afternoon.
the chair recognizes Senator Henfield.
Good afternoon, Madam President, Senate colleagues, fellow Bahamians. So go fire.
I was just saying you following the rules.
Yes, sir.
Taking notes.
Yes, we'll go fire. Madam President, let me begin by giving thanks to the Heavenly Father for life. As I prayed with my kids last night for keeping my family, our friends safe, and our colleagues here. And I appreciate that there are so many families in this country and around the world that are dealing with loved ones that are suffering from COVID. One of the most unfortunate things with dealing with anyone that's suffering from COVID at this time is that you don't get to visit them and spend time with them in this time of fear, uncertainty as to how things will play out. But I wish to begin today, Madam President, by pointing out and referring to Senator Darwell's contributions a moment ago. Senator Darwell would have spoken with respect to countries like New Zealand and indicated on how they were trending in the right direction. And all of us, as was said between both senators just now, Senator Moss and Senator Darwell, all of us read, all of us are watching the news, all of us are doing our research. And yes, those countries are trending in the right way. And for those of us here who live in a real world, we are concerned about our numbers, our family members, and our people. But one of the things I shot up at Senator Darwell and said, though, is that in a lot of those countries, there's an issue of discipline in their people. I am of the view, and this is my view, that the majority of Bahamians are very disciplined and take this virus very seriously. Unfortunately, there is a minute few that refuse to social distance, that refuse to wear a mask, that refuse to frequently sanitize their hands. And that unfortunate minute few puts all of us at risk. But again, I'll repeat what I said, and it's my view that the majority of us in this country are responsible. The majority of us in this country are taking the precautions. However, there is a minute few that are putting us at risk. And no one ought to be able to put anyone at risk. As an attorney, I am aware that And I'm sure, as I said a while ago and agreed with the other senators, all of us read. And I believe all of us would know that there is a law in this country that if you have AIDS and you have sex with someone knowing that you have AIDS, you've committed a criminal offense.
If you haven't told them.
Yes. Yes. I'll yield, Madam President, having sight of the time.
Yes. Madam President,
Chair recognizes Senator Becker.
thank you. I beg leave to move the business of the Senate to continue beyond 1 p.m. If I may obtain a second.
Madam President, I second.
It has been moved and seconded that the business of the Senate be continue beyond the 1 o'clock hour. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The business of the Senate will continue beyond 1 o'clock. Senator Henfield, you may continue.
I'm obliged, Madam President. As I was saying a moment ago, Madam President, all of us are aware that we have a law in this country that if anyone that knows they have AIDS has sex with somebody else, that they are committing an offense. And I wonder if we have taken that position with respect to COVID in this country. I wonder if we've taken that position with respect to COVID in this country. I got a call a few days ago, without giving any names. The gist of it was that a Bahamian from New Province was hired for a job in Exuma. She traveled down for the job. It wasn't disclosed to her that the person she was coming to care for had COVID. So she was cleaning this person's room, taking care of them. Things went south. She was then placed on a boat with this person with COVID to get from one key to another. And I thought when she called me, that is unbelievable. You have put this person's life in danger. And they weren't told before coming there that this person had COVID. So I put that out there today, Madam President, or Madam Chair, and Senator knows that that is something we need to look at. And if it is in the rules, are we as a people, as business owners, are we aware of that if it is in the rules, the regulations, and the orders? And are we enforcing it? Because nobody, as was said by the AG in the beginning, has a right to put the rest of us at risk. You see, COVID isn't a simple flu. If contracted, this person can die. If contracted, this person then takes it home to their family. And there are so many persons around the world who've lost mothers and fathers and grandparents and siblings all in the same family. And that brings me to the point of here in our country. In many of our households in the Bahamas, there are at least 2 to 3 generations in that home. It's the grandparents, our parents, and us. Many grandparents are raising their grandchildren in this country. I look at the incident or the video footage of the 100+ persons exiting that establishment off Collins Avenue a little over a week ago. In one of my chat groups, my male friend said it's such a fine establishment. And I will not comment further, but on a serious point, raised the concern that these young persons in that video return home to their children, return home to their parents. And we need to bear that in mind when we think of these emergency orders and this proclamation of emergency, that it is better to have the power to respond and not need it than need it and not be able to respond. A few months back, I would have been the one to stand here and say we need to look the legislation moving forward. So I did my research and I went all around the world looking at legislation that I appreciated what I should have appreciated from day one as an attorney. There's a constitution that allows for you to take certain rights and privileges from people in an emergency that in an act of parliament you wouldn't be allowed to do. On the last, oh wait, let me clarify that right now. Let me clarify that right now. Let me clarify that right now, Madam Chair. I am not running. I don't plan to run. So I can speak freely and clearly. You plan for me to run. My name is Renard Eric Henville. I do not plan to run, so I can speak freely. So let me just say, while I was of the view that we could address this issue with an act of parliament, as a lawyer and anybody else out there that is legally trained ought to know that there's no act of parliament that can contravene the Constitution. So we can't pass an act of parliament that would allow the minister or anybody in this country to say to me, you can't be out after 10 p.m. You can't travel to the next island. The only way that can be done is by this very Constitution that we have. And that's why I have recoiled from my position months back that we need to move to an act of parliament. So I say to anyone that is of the view that we can do away with this proclamation of emergency and do away with the emergency orders and simply go to an act of parliament, that it will not reap the rewards we think it can. Because in the event we find out there was a super spreader event or there's an event planned for XYZ island or community, we need to be able to respond to that emergency situation. Notwithstanding my position on that, Madam President, I would like to point out where I stand as a father, as a business person, and as a community leader. COVID-19, as I said back in March, does not only present a health crisis, but it presents an economic crisis. It now presents a family structure crisis. It presents a mental health crisis. It presents a housing crisis. A lot of times these debates focus on the health crisis of contracting COVID. And I think we miss the bigger picture sometimes and fail to speak to what many of our people are going through in the thousands. Mental health crisis right now. There are men in this country who are the breadwinners for their families who have not worked in months. And as men, we know what that does to us as a man. Don't let you have a wife who is there barking and barking all day. You ain't nothing, you're good for nothing, you ain't doing this, da 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 da. In addition to the single mothers in this country who have not worked in months or who are now underemployed, they're back to work, but they're doing half days or they're doing 1 or 2 days. I think we forget to speak to that sometimes. There are business places that have been closed that were not able to reopen. There are business places hanging on for their life. There are business places who have to let go staff. And we need to remember that when we speak to these bills. You see, each of us who stands in this place and in the other to agitate and share our concerns, we speak for different groups of people, different political views, but yet every single one of them is a behavior. And this virus has proven that it doesn't care whether you're a PLP, FNM, DNA, or whatever, it doesn't care. So when we meet, this is parliament, this is politics. Yes, there will be some political jabs thrown, there'll be some political rhetoric. But at all times, we should seek to make decisions and have debates that educate our people on how to keep safe and survive this pandemic. I spoke earlier about the generations in a household. I took a drive, Madam President, from where I live, and I always brag about where I live. There's some persons who may live in life in here, Paradise Island. I brag about where I live because I live in the ungated community of Carmichael Road. Proud of where I live. But I get onto Carmichael Road, and there's cars on cars on cars as if we are not going through a pandemic. I go to business places and there are persons that are not observing any social distancing. I've gone to establishment, there's no hand sanitizing station. There's nobody checking temperatures. And I went 3 times this week to my parents' house. 3 times in the last week I went to my parents' house. But I have not been in that house since March. I get there, I call, Mom, I'm through Eastwood. Open up. My mother puts on her mask. My father puts on his mask. I have on my mask. And I get there and I pass over some cake. Yesterday was pumpkin roll. And when I got there, Senator Mitchell is interrupting me, Madam President. I never asked you to protect me. Please don't protect me from him today, because I came for him too. But I get to my parents yesterday
Senator
to bring
Mitchell,
dessert.
will you
Don't
please
protect me, Madam President. I don't need no
disturb
protection from
the
Senator
honorable
Mitchell.
senator?
But I get there, Madam President, and my mom says, "Oh, thanks for dessert." I say, "Well, what you cook?" And she says to me, "No, Senator Mitchell provided food." I walked off. I wanted to go back for my dessert, but I said, "That's my mom." So she keep the dessert. But I put him on notice Christmas Day.
In his,
Don't go there.
where is his constituency?
So I put him on notice now, Madam President. Like
Clarification.
Christmas Day, don't go there. I carry Christmas breakfast, lunch, dinner, and dessert. But I say that to say jokingly, Madam President, that whether you are PLP, FNM, DNA, whatever it is, we are all concerned about the safety of our people. I am of the view that it is better to have something and not need it than to need it and not have it. I am of the view, again, that it's better to have something and not need it and need it and not have it. Madam President, I would only ask that we bear in mind every time we make these decisions and we make debates that there are families in this country with a breadwinner who is a man who has not worked in months, who is now going through a lot, or he's been going through a lot for quite some time. I will draw to the Parliament's attention that in the last 8 months, divorces in this country have spiked. Spiked divorces. For every one of us that practices in family law, we can tell you the number one business right now for us as litigation lawyers is in divorces, which is unfortunate. It's unfortunate. For those of us who are in activism, one of the biggest concerns right now is the rise in domestic violence. And all of these things are as a result of this global pandemic. So I ask the Parliament to bear that in mind. I ask us as leaders, regardless of where you sit, who you speak for, to bear in mind that we came here to this place to serve our people. And we have to bear in mind when we have these debates and we make decisions, how our people are affected. And yes, we need the lockdowns and the curfews, etc., but we all want to, as Senator Dow said, balance lives with livelihoods, something I would have said back in March. We have to balance lives with livelihoods. This is not just a health pandemic. It has presented us with an economic crisis, a family structure crisis, a housing crisis. I saw a post yesterday in one of these local Facebook groups for Bahamian landlords, and a landlord posted in the group for all landlords to see. The courts are open, we can evict. And over 54 landlords commenting what was the procedure, which court you went to, etc. And they're sharing the procedure to go and evict. Well, no, I didn't say I know a good lawyer. They know I'm a good lawyer. I don't need to say that. Only bad lawyers go around saying they're good. There's no need for that. But Madam President, I say that and we joke around sometimes when we make our contributions because of the camaraderie. But in all seriousness, our people are going through a lot. The emergency orders, the lockdowns, the curfews. We are a social people. We love to socialize. Every time I go with my parents, I pass my bedroom, and I haven't lived there since the 90s almost. But I park my car by my old bedroom. I want to get in that house so bad to make sure they haven't rented out my bedroom, but they don't let me in. And that's just the seriousness that my parents have. At their age, we cannot take the risk. So I don't put them in harm's way. Unfortunately, I see it every single day. I see so many young people putting their children and their seniors in harm's way. So again, I say in my wrap up, while I support the extension, that it is better to have these powers and not need them, Madam President, than something happen and we need it and we don't have the powers. With that, I offer my support and pray that we all, as national leaders, remember that we are here to serve our people and we go out of our way to understand and appreciate what they're going through.
Thank you, Senator. As many. The chair recognizes Senator Mitchell. No, that's not yet. I have to go.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I just wanted to try not to be didactic and rather just go down a list of things that just need to be dealt with. The first was the question of the Leader of the Opposition's statement yesterday in the House. And I think it's rather unfortunate to say that he deliberately misquoted the leader of this place. You may disagree with the quote. It may have been, I don't know what it is, but anything, that's a different thing from saying someone deliberately did what he did. And that may be what he heard and understood. So I just wanted to make that point, that I thought that was a rather unfortunate characterization of what the leader of the opposition
He knew what he was saying.
had to say.
He knew what he was saying.
So it looks like we are going to be back in jail for Christmas. And what do you want me to take back?
Well,
All of us,
that's
we are going
his
to be in jail.
evaluation. We won't
We'll
be in jail, but he's decided he
We'll be in
wants
jail.
to be.
And I'm here to vote for the get out of jail card.
Okay.
Yesterday, in the other place, the Minister for Social Services said he was confused about the opposition's position because he said, on the one hand, we're claiming that this is an abuse of power, it's dictatorial, but such a wonderful government that he's a part of was allowing this debate to take place in Parliament so that we could do what Parliament does, which is from time to time review these matters. So he wants to know, what are we actually talking about? So I thought I'd help a little bit to explain what's going on. This is a matter for us of civil liberties. And it's very interesting, the U.S. courts yesterday, because I never could understand why the church allowed this to take place. But the U.S. courts yesterday stopped the governor of New York from imposing limits on people attending church. And they said it was an overreach because it was an interference with the provision in their constitution which has to do with freedom of religion. Now, we have in our constitution a provision, the one which is being used now in Article 29. But there's a provision in that of 29 which says that it must still be reasonably justifiable. When you look at the American case, the case they are making, and it's reported in the newspapers as a religious freedom issue, but the argument really was, you cannot or you should not make a provision which is discriminatory between the secular world and the religious world. That was the argument. Right. The argument is that there must be equality of treatment. So therefore, if you apply one set of rules to one, you should apply. You should not discriminate. And that is the proposition that we've been seeking to advance in our courts here. But what the difference is, they were able to get them out of the court. We can't even get them out of the court. Can't even get them out of the court. So that's part of what this is about, the civil liberties issue. And also, what does an opposition party do? We're supposed to come in, if I take all the sotto voce comments and those on the record, we're supposed to be supplicant and say, it's wonderful, it's all good, it's all great, it's nice, you're doing a fantastic job, while you're taking us to the slaughterhouse. That can't work. That can't work. Even if you're not taking us to the slaughterhouse, it's our job to forensically go through what it is you intend to do and to say, this does not look like it's the correct thing. When I spoke here the last time, we told people how, I think it's the same incident the senator was talking about, where these kids go to to one of these clubs and they're scrambling outside because they're running from the police, because the police have broken up the social gathering. Now, clearly, the social gatherings are one of the causes for the community spread that Senator Dalva was talking about. But I also said at that time, this is a country of the consent of the government. And if these young people want to change the order, one of the ways to do it is to change the political order. Change the political order. That's what happens in a democratic society, is you change the political order. So instead of running from the police, organize yourselves and get yourself a new government. And maybe things will change. So, well, that's what I said. That's what I said. When I spoke the last time in here, I said that. I am busy trying to get them to organize themselves to vote for a new government. I said that. Well, it's their country. That's the problem. It's their country. No, it may. I'm only saying, it may. No, it may. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. Now, another thing I said is this. I said, with these orders again, why does a Bahamian citizen need to pay $40 or get a visa to come back to his own country? I say it again. That's nonsensical. Nonsensical. To come back to your own country. And then, has the government accounted? I understand this money is being collected by a firm named Canoe. They're the ones who collect the money. So yeah, exactly. Who are they? Who are these folks? Was this contract publicly advertised? That's fine. Who are they? Who are the principals? And was there a public tendering process for the contract? See, well, the problem, Madam Speaker, is, Madam President, the leader for government business approbates and reprobates.
Thank you.
So one day he says, bring the question and I'll answer it. But, and you shouldn't be approbating and reprobating at the same time, right? So,
different day.
So, but I'll oblige him and bring the question anyhow. But the point is, who are they? I mean, I have no problem. They're Bahamian citizens, no issue. Was it a publicly tendered contract? So I look at this now, and I said, there are 356 days in the year, Madam President. $40 a piece. And if we get... 365. Okay, yeah, 365. I transposed the numbers. 365. You're right. And if you collecting $40 a week, that's almost $400,000 you collect in a year, right? No. That's $400,000 you collect in a day, and about $15 million that you collect in a year. Isn't that right? If you get $1,000 visitors a day, rounding off the numbers, you're collecting about $15 million a year, are you? 14 point some, right? Yeah, that's a lot of money. So where's it going? Who's getting it? How's the revenue being shared? There's no insurance for Bahamians. So tell us where this money is going and how it's being disaggregated, how is it being shared. And then, of course, who is making this money and who are they connected to? What we do know is that, I think it was Robbie Myers was in the newspaper rally saying, look, that's why I don't like to deal with governments, because we made a deal, we brought in these $3 million tests, and now they canceled the deal. And I've now wasted money. But who are the principals behind this? So I leave that. Other issue, the schools. Just talking around the schools. What are the children actually doing in the schools during this period of lockdowns and all this stuff that we're in? Just anecdotally, one school out east, told me, government school, not the private school, that only 30% of the students in that school are actually participating in some form of education. So 70%, they have no idea what they're doing. None. No, they're not there physically, and they're not engaged. That's why I said it the way I did, or virtually. Junior high out west here. One school teacher tells me that she has 70 students. 40 of them are engaged in the virtual classroom. The rest, she had no idea what they're doing, where they are. School down here in the South. Kid has been unable to get, 17 years old, last year in high school. For the last weeks, he's been unable to get the code which will allow him to access the virtual platform. Now, these are all anecdotal. I don't know. I read this morning somewhere in the press where the Minister of Education is saying 25% of students going to have to resit the whole year because they may have missed it. But my general position is, again, anecdotal, going through my former area. You questioned whether I have a constituency, but my former area.
I was inquiring. I was inquiring.
Just watching the kids just walking up and down all day. And I asked myself, why are adolescent boys and girls in the road at 10, 11, 12 o'clock in the day? What are they doing? And if this is a widespread phenomenon, what kind of hole are we actually building, social hole are we actually building, not only in the short term, but in the long term in our country, if they've missed out on their education? I mean, it's bad enough as it is now. And this situation seems to be exacerbating what is an already bad situation. Foreign ministry. You got a new president of the United States, if he's allowed into his house on the 20th of January, who will take over the realms of the helm of the government. And the policies of the United States are likely to change. The present policies of the United States government are laissez-faire with regard to this pandemic. Those on the side of individual freedom appear to be in the ascendancy in the United States, and those on the side of a more government interference seem to be on the downside. The point that I'm making is, we've got foreign ministry. There's likely to be a change in policy going forward. I raised it here before. Suppose that includes a lockdown generally of the United States, assuming that it can get past their courts. Is anyone reaching out from our foreign ministry to the president-elect, his people, or have they prepared position papers to figure out what does the Bahamas government do in that eventuality? I was very interested to find out that our intelligence services here in the Bahamas on all sorts of stuff prepare and write papers to predict what the various outcomes will be for our country. That's what intelligence services do. So our own government should be having some kind of, and our foreign ministry in particular, ought to have some kind of position paper, which is working on now, to say, I think Dr. Dowell called it the plan. What is it in this scenario? 6 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 1 year out. We know that what happened in 9/11, when the country shut down for 2 weeks, the United States said no one can come in, no one can get out. And we then had the issue of food security here because the warehouses in the country started to run out. So where are your alternative supplies in what they're calling now the supply chain? So when we look at the measures, the range of measures, that's our tack. Our tack is this is a civil liberties issue as well as a public health issue. And no responsible citizen in this country should wholesale and in silence turn over these kinds of draconian provisions to a government without a peep. None. And our citizens expect us to stand up in here and say, this doesn't look right, that doesn't look right, that doesn't appear to be working. Your job, if you discharge it, if I may give that advice, is to say, well, it is working, and these are the facts. And then the public will decide where we are. But it just comes off, certain things just come off as wrong. I mean, I thought to myself, you know, I've said kind of jokingly that the cabinet's living life in a bubble. But I thought to myself, Madam President, what would have possessed the most honorable Prime Minister to photograph himself running up and down a beach in San Salvador when people in this country, back here in New Providence, are 3 to a bed, houses packed with people. This morning, just in a moment of relaxation, driving here about some issue that I thought, okay, well, that's settled. 2 seconds later, my phone goes off. Do you think you could leave a voucher for me to get something to eat? I mean, you know, the issue of people and food and the complications of their lives, it's fine for us to get up. A doctor can give you this prescription, that prescription, but, you know, it gets to a point where this stuff becomes so overwhelming that people stop listening to you. And that's what's happening to the younger people. They just have the energy to be able to escape it. So that's why we keep saying, once again, public education, public education. And, you know, you have to be sensitive to people's concerns. Sensitivity is a big thing in public life. It helps you to survive, I think. You know, Bill Cosby had this problem with the black community. Cosby went and he, you know, pushed out all these young black men, but they're wearing their pants down below their waist and the way they talk and all the rest of it, none of which has anything to do with intelligence. You know, people wear their pants down, that's their business. Those are personal choices. So when he got in trouble, the black community helped to put him under. So that happens to public figures. And I dare say the lesson this week of your own member could have ended up differently had the impression been given that this was a man sensitive to what was going on in the country. But, you know, 2 weeks ago, he's making fun of my colleague down in the other place. You know, you don't understand what's going on. I don't expect you to understand what's going on. It just came off as haughty and insensitive. So the conventions, Madam President, of our Constitution operate in this way. They're not ironclad rules. It's whether the community supports. When something goes wrong, if the community supports it and says, I'm willing to give you a buy, that's the way it operates. That's the way it operates. Yes, there are rules. Yes, there's, you know, the comp and all the rest of it. But it's all about the community and what its response is to you. So that's what we're arguing for. In these policies, you're the government. You can put them in place. You know you have to operate, but you can't live your life in a bubble because in the end, it's going to backfire. That's the point. And all of it, I was just watching. Mel Brooks has a thing about Caesar Augustus, a spoof that he's made of Caesar Augustus. I've forgotten what the name of the movie actually is, but there's this hilarious scene where they're announcing Caesar is coming in. And they're going, Hail Caesar, but there's a fellow behind him. And they said this actually used to happen, in fact. And the fellow behind Caesar, as he's walking, is saying in Caesar's ear, remember Caesar, thou art mortal. Remember Caesar, thou art mortal. So I make those points. I summarize them again. We'd like to know who is collecting this $40 a head, the aggregate collection amount, and how is it allocated between those who are providing the service and the government. Secondly, the question of the schools and whether there is an actual tracking of the attendance of children in school and what's going on with that. And of course, the protection of the teachers. And then, are we looking at a forward plan as we anticipate a change of administrations in the United States of America? With that, I thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, sir. Chair recognizes Senator Bethel.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Sorry. Thank you very much, Madam President. Let me again congratulate all persons that contributed to the debate on the quality of their presentations and the obvious philosophic, if you will, differences that separate us and divide us. It's easy when you're in opposition to stand on philosophy. The burden on a government, however, is totally different. The burden we face and have to shoulder is responsibility for the lives of Bahamians, the welfare of the health care system, the ability of those who contract this disease to be effectively and efficiently treated, the ability for persons with other comorbidities that also require hospitalization, that they are not shut out because of the crush of an overwhelming number of infections and infected cases that require hospitalization. And so we have to take very difficult decisions. I acknowledge, yes, that we are all tired of COVID-19. We are all sick and tired of having restrictions on our movements. We are sick and tired of not being able to congregate in our usual social clubs and as freely as we did in our church services and settings. We're tired of it. But that's what the virus wants. It wants you to get tired of it. It wants you to drop your guard. It wants you to allow it to freely pass throughout society without restriction. That's what it wants. The same way how the medical evidence shows once someone is infected, it finds the weakest spot and goes at that, whatever part of your body it happens to be. Because it is not a flu, nor is it a pneumonia. It doesn't only go for the lungs. Wherever it finds the weaknesses, that is where it focuses. Yes, and it is now focusing on our mental weakness, our societal weakness, that we can't hold this discipline because it's our 8 months, and oh my God, and I'm climbing the walls. We're climbing the walls. I understand that. But it's only a little while longer now. It's only a little while longer until we reach 2021. It's only a little while longer. What is the strategy of the competent authority? It is clear: to manage the risk of opening our economy in the face of what is going on in the United States and the rest of the world. The rest of the world is locking down. I hear members opposite saying, oh, you don't need this, you don't need this. And all of those rich, powerful countries who have great influence on the CDC and on the World Health Organization, who fund it, and so who receive all of these wonderful statements that, oh, you shouldn't lock down, you shouldn't lock down. What are they doing today? They are locking down. because it is the only way to stop community spread of a virulent pathogen. Period. London, Berlin just topped 1 million infections yesterday. Hundreds of thousands are in hospital. And they are locking down. The Bahamas did what it had to do to contain this second wave, and we have done an admirable job. If only Western Europe, Russia, and Russia got vaccine, they say, and still got a lockdown because it was a political vaccine. Say we outface. Okay. China itself is being forced to reimpose lockdown conditions in the central part of the country today as we speak. My friend, the leader opposite. So let me just close this point before I deal with this issue. The fact is that the Bahamas, having managed the second wave, is now commencing the easing of restrictions and the opening of the economy, and that risk must be managed. So even though the Bahamians will see, as we continue to contain and isolate this virus, as we open the economy, they will see decreasing levels of restrictions. What will happen, though, is that where clusters are found, in order to eradicate them, the government reserves the power, the full powers under the Constitution. And as I say, the emergency powers are constitutional. They are of the Constitution, not under the Constitution. And that is why they differ from statutory powers. My friend across the aisle, the table, spoke to the recent decision of the United States Supreme Court. It's interesting because, of course, we know the processes and the considerations that go into the appointment of chief of justices of the Supreme Court in the U.S. And we know that there are certain ideological consequences, ideological thinking that imbue each and every justice in their own right. But as an attorney, when I hear an opinion and I hear the reasoning, I can form a judgment as to whether or not the judge is motivated more by ideology and rationality, by emotional considerations, etc. And the most spurious argument I've heard from one justice, I said his name sitting down, I won't say it here, was that churches in New York are being discriminated against because, unlike other businesses, such as bike stores could open, but the church can't without restriction. So when did church become a business? When did churches, places of worship, become mere businesses? And the proposition that you can't discriminate against different types of businesses is ludicrous, in my view. Because there are some businesses that by their very nature are high contagion spots. Now, I have never in my mind considered the church a business. But in South Korea, the evidence emerged almost immediately that one of the main carriers and vector points for the spread of COVID in the early days was churches. And the history of the state of Israel would show that the main vectors for the carriage of COVID cases were the Orthodox population and the mosques, where people worship in close physical proximity. And in the United States and here in the Bahamas, there have been instances of entire churches infected because of you're singing, you're praising, you're emotional, you're in contact, and you're in enclosed spaces. So, that's one. We also know that a retail store, you don't have people singing hymns, dancing. What do you call it? When they go around and circle the church, Russian, whatever, right? They used to jump in the old days. No, you don't have that in a bicycle store or in a retail store. You don't have the passion, the emotion. So retail stores have greater freedom. But why are gyms closed? Well, think about it. Why are gyms closed? Because they are also an acknowledged hotspot. Gyms are closed across the globe. Why? You're sweating, you're breathing heavily, you're exercising, you're in an enclosed space, and there are other persons in the same room, and you breathe in the same air. And we all know, while this virus may not be, strictly speaking, airborne, it has airborne qualities. They say that the virus, this 9 feet that we talked about, of physical distancing, that was when we thought it was only borne by particles. Actually, tests have showed, the Smithsonian and all these other types of testing entities, that the airborne aspect of it can carry the virus more than 20 feet away. More than 20 feet away. Now, it eventually drops because it's not fully airborne. But we sit around and, and so when I hear members opposite, and it's almost flippantly, just say, oh, it's all about personal freedom. We want to liberate, we want to get out of jail. All of that. It's highly irresponsible in my view. And I know that if he and I were on different seats today, he would have the same view, the member opposite, as I would. Because it's different to stand in the gallery and try to pick holes in what the government's doing. That's an entirely different duty than the duty of the government to govern in the best interests of the people, even if the people, by emotional reaction to all that we have suffered through, even if the people don't want it, don't appreciate it. Notwithstanding that, the burden of governance is such that we cannot fly, we cannot fail, we cannot fail in this matter. Okay. So, there's that aspect of it. Yes, there are differences between activities. And those activities that have been shown epidemiologically to be the activities which encourage the higher and more rapid spread of the virus are legitimately restricted based on the medical data. And as and when that changes, as and when we reach this stage of mass vaccinations, then all of these things can fall away, God willing. But we have to get there. And we have to preserve our economy and keep it going. And so, yes, difficult, unpopular decisions have to be made, but they are being made for the benefit of every behavior. I heard some talk about, testing. You must do testing. It's not the issue of cost now. And the government should engage in mass random testing. A test is only as good as the day is taken on. Just yesterday, it was announced that the Portuguese rugby team, I think, had gone to South Africa in order to participate in a tournament. 6 members tested positive. Hold a second. Prior to their leaving, they were tested on over a period of days 4 different times with an RT-PCR test. And each time the test came back negative. But the day they landed in South Africa, took a test, 6 positive. And they just went on playing with the rest. Okay? Testing has its benefits. Testing is not a panacea, and it is not the solution. This is shown over and repeatedly. Why is it not? Because the doctors will tell you that pre-symptomatic people who are tested too early don't have sufficient viral load, and totally asymptomatic people may not have the viral load in their nostrils. It's elsewhere in their body. They ain't even feeling it. The whole point is you may not have sufficient viral load that is detectable. Testing is helpful, but it is not determinative. How do you think this nasty virus is sneaking all around the place? People get a negative test and they feel, okay, all right, Jack. But it is not a perfect test. It does not reveal every case. So let us get out of our head this mantra of opposition parties all around the world. All you have to do is test everybody, and that will solve the problem. It will not. It will not. And all of the evidence shows that. The question was why we laid a resolution and then the proclamation came, because we had no guarantee the Governor General would see an emergency. We were right up at the end of the month. We had no guarantee, because when the Governor General considers this under the Constitution, he is bound to be guided by his own deliberate judgment. And he could, and we were not, and we would not presume. But because we put a piece of paper in front of the Governor General in a matter where his own deliberate judgment is mandated by the Constitution, we would not put ourselves in a position where we would even appear to be presuming that His Excellency the Governor General is just going to sign a piece of paper because we put him in front of him. It is the own deliberate judgment of the Governor General, not that of the competent authority, not that of the government. So we could not presume. And therefore, that is why we followed the procedure that we did. So, Madam President, with these notes, I commend this much needed resolution to all colleague senators, and I urge your full support of it. And I now move, Madam President, that the question now be put.
The question is, whereas pursuant to Article 29 of the Constitution, the Governor General may make a proclamation of emergency declaring that a state of public emergency for the purposes of that article exists in the Bahamas. And whereas on the 17th day of March 2020, a proclamation of emergency was made by the Governor General declaring that a state of public emergency existed in the Bahamas, and this proclamation expired on the 29th day of June 2020. And whereas on the 29th day of June 2020, a second proclamation of emergency was made by the Governor General declaring that a state of public emergency existed in the Bahamas, and this proclamation was due to expire on the 29th day of December 2020. And whereas pursuant to Article 29(4) of the Constitution, another proclamation of emergency may be made before the expiration of a proclamation of emergency extended under Article 29(5). And whereas pursuant to Article 29(4) of the Constitution, the Governor General made a proclamation of emergency hereinafter the proclamation dated the 24th day of November 2020, declaring that a state of public emergency exists in the Bahamas. And whereas pursuant to Article 29(4) of the Constitution, the proclamation ceases to be in force at the expiration of a period of 14 days beginning on the date on which it was made, or such longer period as may be approved under paragraph 5 of Article 29 of the Constitution. And whereas Article 29(5) of the Constitution provides for the continuance in force of a proclamation if at any time while the proclamation is in force, a resolution is passed by each House of Parliament approving its continuance in force of a further period not exceeding 6 months, beginning on the date on which it would otherwise expire, the proclamation shall, if not sooner revoked, continue in force for that further period. And whereas, pursuant to Section 3(1) of the Emergency Powers Act, Chapter 34, herein after the Act, the Governor General made the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Regulations 2020 on the 24th day of November 2020. And whereas Section 3(3) of the Act provides that emergency regulations may empower such authorities or persons as may be specified in the regulations to make orders and rules for any of the purposes for which such regulations are authorized by the Act to be made, and may contain such incidental and supplementary provisions as appear to the Governor General to be necessary or expedient for the purposes of the regulations. And whereas the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Regulations 2020 empower the competent authority to make such orders, and whereas the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Order 2020 was made by the competent authority on the 24th day of November 2020, and whereas the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Special Provisions Order 2020 was made by the competent authority on the 24th day of November 2020. And whereas, having regard to the continuing proliferation of confirmed cases in neighboring jurisdictions and active cases in the Bahamas, and whereas the state of public emergency in the Bahamas continues, and whereas it continues to be necessary and expedient for securing the public safety, the defense of the Bahamas, the maintenance of public order, the suppression of mutiny, rebellion, and riot, and for maintaining supplies and services essential to the life and well-being of the community to continue in force. The proclamation, the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Regulations 2020, the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Order 2020, and the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Special Provisions Order 2020. Now, therefore, be it resolved that these chambers approve the continuance of the proclamation of emergency made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 31st day of January 2021. Affirms the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Regulations 2020 made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 31st day of January 2021. Affirms the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Order 2020 made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 31st day of January 2021, and affirms the continuance in effect of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Pandemic Risk Management Special Provisions Order 2020 made on the 24th day of November 2020 until the 31st of January 2021. That is a motion, honorable senators. All those in favor? All those opposed to the resolution? Nay. There's one nay. Oh, I didn't hear him. That's why I said.
I wanted to mark you with us, Doctor.
The motion passes.
Me.
The ayes have it. The motion passes. Okay. Discharge of select committees. We're back to our order of business. Discharge of select committees, notices for future meetings. Chair
Madam,
recognizes Senator Bethel.
thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I wish to renew all notices in the name of the government on the agenda. Give notice that the Senate on its rising will adjourn sine die, and we'll await the progress in the House. May I just step off a moment? I'd like to just bring words of condolences to mark the passing of Wellington Smith. Wellington Smith was a most valuable, gentle, hardworking employee of the Registrar General's Department. He was the choir master for First Baptist Church. He was a homegrown computer genius. Okay, anything that affected the systems of the Registrar General's office, he was usually able to correct. He ran the old IT system, but much more than that. He was a man of absolute integrity. So much so that we were in the course of seeking to have him appointed to be an assistant registrar of the Registrar General's office. The old nostrum that you had to be a lawyer to be an assistant or deputy registrar was broken by my predecessor, because nowhere in the law did it appear. And there was a previous deputy registrar, now deceased, a very gentle person who was not a lawyer, but who very effectively, Darren Crary, who very effectively performed those duties. And we were seeking to have Wellington Smith promoted to the rank of an assistant registrar at the time of his untimely passing. I went to rescue to pay my respects to his mortal remains and to say a prayer yesterday afternoon. And out of respect for him and all that he stood for and all that he did for the Bahamian people, I could not fail to go there and give him that last earthly tribute of love and respect. And so, on behalf of the government and the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, I wish to offer to his bereaved family our deepest and most sincere condolences and prayers that he may rest in peace and rise in glory.
May he rest.
In the name of the Lord. Thank you.
Notices for future meetings.
Yes, thank
Chair
you.
recognizes Senator Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. I, of course, join in the condolences extended to Mr. Smith's family from this side as well. Thank you. I'd like to renew all notices standing in the name of the opposition, and then I'd like to pose the following, say at the next meeting, ask the following questions. Who is the owner or owners of the firm Canoe? Who receives the fee of $40 collected for the domestic visa? And how much revenue is collected from this fee, and how is the revenue shared and to whom? The second question should in fact read the international travel visa. Yeah. I can't depend on your don't worry though.
Go outside and put it up there.
It's signed. Well done.
Excuse me.
Thank you, and renewing all notices in the name of the opposition.
The chair recognizes Senator Moss.
Madam President, just want to take this time to publicly send happy birthday to my daughter, Jamazia Moss.
Great.
Jamazia Moss, my daughter.
His daughter.
Oh, you know,
Yeah. I felt the need to do that because, as you know, Madam President, I've been through a whole lot raising my daughter at my younger age, and she is definitely my heart. I just want to let you know I love you. You pick me up when I come from here, and then we can have fun. So I just want to encourage
I hope you told her to watch.
Pardon?
I hope you told her to watch.
Oh yeah, but I'm recording it. She's in class right now,
Oh,
so
okay.
yeah. But I told her I'd record it. You know, but I just also
That's
want to
nice.
take this time also too, while we are celebrating Men's Day, that was last week, that I want to encourage fathers out there, especially young men, despite the situation between you and the mother, just do your part in being involved with your children or your child. Just do your part, and you'll be surprised at the impact that you can make on that one. So I just wanted to stand and say happy birthday to you, Jamazio.
Thank you. Orders for clerk? Adjournment?
Thank you, Madam President. I now beg leave to move that the Senate upon its rising be adjourned sine die. If I may obtain a seconder.
Madam President, I rise a second.
It has been moved and seconded that the Senate on its rising adjourn sine die. As many as are in favor.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Okay, you can stay, sir. The ayes have it. This
Madam President, I know, first you say,
the Senate be adjourned sine die.
thank you, Madam President. I now beg leave to move that the Senate be now adjourned.
The Senate is now adjourned.